This is Force 13 Live. We're looking at Hurricane Irma, which is progressing towards the west with winds of at least 120 miles an hour according to the latest update from the National Hurricane Center, though according to our satellite eyes it may be contesting for 130 at the latest images, but it's well on its way to Category 4 status at this time, still officially a Category 3. I'm Nathan Foy. I'm joined by Craig here in the studio at this hour to track the storm, and it's been doing all sorts of things over the last few days. Craig, your prognosis this morning.
Wow. Irma's been one of them hurricanes that has been annoying storm trackers for the past couple of days, whether she'd be forming her eye or not, but today she's decided that she will form her eye. And, well, it's getting rather scary to watch, especially for land areas that are in her wake. So she's looking a damn sight better than what she was yesterday. Struggling to form her eye, as everyone else noticed yesterday. But I'll bring the screen share up, and the screen share should be up right now. Here's the latest image of Irma from the woman imagery of the amazing Ghost 16. You can just see how much of an improvement she has made. She just looks fantastic. And you can see here, lack of spiral bands. There might be the hint of an annular transition, but I would need to see microwave imagery for that time, but I haven't got the recent one yet. So, but looking at her, I mean, this is a big improvement from yesterday, a massive improvement. And, you know, just seeing how the latest few frames, you can see how the eye's developed. You can see how the eye's gone from rather ragged, still looking ragged yet, but cloud-filled, to better defined. As you can see in the last frame, and the cloud tops in the eastern and western eye wall are cooling. So here's the latest, well, the last microwave image that I got, so from Archer, and well, you can see here is what looks to be another eye wall, but I can assure you that it's not an eye wall replacement, because the change here is the exact same structure as it was a couple of hours ago, but this is pretty much irrelevant now, because it's changed. The structure has changed that much in its previous few stages of its life.
Now, on the other side of the screen, you can see the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, which if you saw last night, if you were looking at their website, and if you were looking at our forecasts, which may not have been as clear as the NHC, because we don't often go out to 5 days on our recorded forecasts for the uncertainty factor, but you can see it there, and how the track has shifted considerably to the south, and that's in line with the computer models as well. The most notable thing that's happened overnight is that the HWRF, and particularly the HMON model, have moved south. I mention the HMON because it was always the model that had the storm recurving the most, but now it's pretty much in line with the National Hurricane Center forecast.
And just to also point out, Nathan, Recon has just found the new low pressure. Why the NHC has gone with 947s, because Recon has found 947 millibars inside of the eye. She's getting deeper with every pass.
I know. Well, hasn't Jason, our other member, just told us that it's 944 now?
That might be. I think that's what the plane might be reporting, but because the most recent pressures that they say the planes have been recording, the pressure drop zones have different. But he might not be wrong.
Well, it's in the 940s anyway, and
yeah,
that's usually the indicator of some significant more strengthening towards Category 4 status. Now, as you've probably gathered, and as you can see, there's a hurricane watch in effect for Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius and St. Martin, and St. Barthélemy, St. Martin's mentioned twice there, just in case you weren't aware, because it's actually divided into two jurisdictions. Obviously, a hurricane watch means that hurricane conditions are possible within the watch area, and I'd say it's more than possible, it's likely in all of those areas. Let me tell you about the wind probabilities. I think that's more interesting.
Yeah.
According to the National Hurricane Center, percent chance of hurricane conditions. This is interesting. Antigua 31%, Barbuda 50%, half a chance of hurricane conditions. St Kitts and Nevis 27%, St Martin 47%, St Croix 20%, St Thomas 36%, Puerto Rico, San Juan 29%, Santo Domingo 9%. Obviously that's on the southern side of the Dominican Republic. Puerto Plata 22%. And those are pretty much all of the notable ones until you get to Grand Turk, 36%. That's about it, really. And the Turks and Caicos Islands, I mean, the models have been... Some of the models have wanted those islands obliterated off the map in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Don't take too much heed to those if you've been looking.
Take some heat from their trap, but intensity do take a major pinch of salt with of caution. So...
And what do you think of what the models have been saying? In fact, the latest trend right now, Craig, is that the models in general are taking the storm into Cuba and then recurving into Florida.
Yeah, that would probably be, well, how would describe it? I would say probably massive disaster if that happened, because it's a big land. Some of them are saying
And in fact, I'm just looking at the 6 Zulu run that just came out from the HMON, and it's still trending south, but it's starting to become a bit of a downfall for the storm now, because it's no longer predicting a Category 5, just borderline 155 miles an hour. And because it stays so far south, it's not too much clearance from Hispaniola, which could, mess things up a bit. And then the landfall in Cuba really weakens the thing.
Yeah, the mountainous terrain is going to have its right all effect on Irma. But looking at the HWRF 06Z as well, they said, I think they put Category 5 over Puerto Rico or something like that. Regardless of strength, this is going to be a dangerous hurricane.
No, not quite.
06Z, there's the highest wind speed, 155 if it's lucky, but as I was going to say, regardless of strength, this is a major hurricane.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the HWRF now, and it says that pretty much the same as the HMON, to be honest. It does go north of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico doesn't get hurricane force winds. And then it goes on to it passes very close to the Turks and Caicos Islands as a Category 4, landfall in Cuba as a Category 3 or 4. And I think it also says that, that the HWRF and HMON are keen in the latest run that it will really mess up Irma and weaken it from Category 3 to Category 1 in both cases. Now, I'm not sure that's going to occur. They're implying that the storm will weaken from 140 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour in 6 hours. Not sure about that. The HWRF from 120 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour in 6 hours. That's a little bit more understandable, and then down further to 75 miles an hour 12 hours after the landfall, which is possible. But there we go. We're now joined by Orlando.
Hello.
Good morning on the US East Coast, and perhaps you're not really too concerned anymore about a significant impact in your neck of the woods up there in New Jersey, but further south in Florida and on the Caribbean islands.
Yeah. Actually, I have family in both the Caribbean and the.
Oh, I think who's trailed off. But yeah, you know, I can see watches and warnings, watches coming up for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico pretty soon. And I think at some point, all of those Greater Antilles, plus or minus Jamaica, maybe, I don't know, depends how far south it goes, probably won't see watches and warnings in Jamaica. But all of those other islands in the Greater Antilles, you know, we could see watches and warnings for. If you've got any questions for us whilst we're on the air, do send them in. Start your message with Force 13, all in text, and it will light up for me nicely. And we will respond. I don't think we've had any of those just yet.
And looking at the latest few frames of Irma, the eye might be just continuing to grow in size. And that in itself is concerning, because what looked to be on microwave imagery is that the storm could be going, well, trying to go quote-unquote annular. As you can see that here, you can see how much the spiral bands have completely eroded from the hurricane. This in itself, you hear annular Atlantic, it does tend to get alarm bells. Certainly has alarm bells ringing in my head, because but looking here, here's what I think could be the eye trying to expand. You'd see how this looks to be the eye in general. But I would be very interested to see the new microwave. This was the recent one. In fact, hang on, there is a brand new one coming out because it's been upgraded. We should hopefully see a new microwave image out of that, because we should be due 3 microwave images in a row, so it's going to be interesting to see what this one comes out with.
I'll also be bringing up some imagery of the storm shortly. Craig, do you think this... Some of the models were suggesting yesterday, including the HWRF, that it would get to Category 5 before the islands. Based on this trend, do you think that's a possibility?
There is that possibility that it might, but there also it's pretty much 50-50. There's a good chance that it might. There's a good chance that it might not. I'm on that 50% side of might not. Well, I hope not anyway. But to be honest, with the way the Atlantic's behaved in the last few months, and for this season in general, anything's possible. Literally anything is possible. But looking at Irma right now, there is that possibility that it could. I don't want to cause alarm, but there is that chance that it could.
Yeah, I got to agree with Craig on that one. It's just very complicated at the moment, though, if it will or if it won't. But if it was, hypothetically speaking, it would basically track a bit more to the north than it would be now.
Yeah.
Which could help save it from killing itself in Cuba, if that ends up happening.
And it appears in the last frame of the Go 16 IR imagery, it appears that the eye isn't actually trying to expand.
Yeah.
Looking at here, the eye down here could be trying to grow from the south. The way, as I said, to show the eye, it's basically freshly come out of the ground. It's just been developed. The eye's been fluctuating.
It's probably its 5th eye. And you can see the latest imagery here, another view of the infrared that I'm showing now. The latest image in this sequence is nearly an hour old, but there is the eye, and I wonder if we could possibly get the 1-minute imagery. I'd like to show the longer range imagery just to show you how it's been progressing over a few hours, but the 1-minute imagery is more up to date, so we can see how it looks like immediately. But we'll stick with Craig's imagery until I can get there.
Well, this is 1 minute anyway, because this runs off the 6.
Well, if that's the case, then it doesn't look as good as it did an hour ago.
Well, 1 minute imagery, it would be nice to show, but it's just the fact that it's for some reason, I don't know if you experience the same problem, Craig, but for me, it's not picking up whatsoever.
Why has it done that? Why are you only doing 12 when I clicked on 24 images? God darn it.
Yeah, well, the imagery that Craig is showing is up to date, and is actually newer than what we were
Yes.
just showing, but based on that, it doesn't look quite as good as it did on the imagery I've just been showing.
Yeah, but as I said, seeing as how it is a brand new eye, pretty much it's 1 billionth eye, seeing as how it's not indecisive, that shows you how annoyed storm trackers have been getting with the darn thing. But as I said, it is a brand new eye, so it will fluctuate in terms of state. But if the eye continues like this, then it will maintain 120 miles an hour. But 120 miles an hour is still extremely dangerous. But you can see here in the last few images, Irma, you can see how the structure has been expanding and how it's been growing. She's still in the mindset of growing, but it's only a matter of time before you see a very well-defined eye completely. It's just a matter of time now, because the storm, as you can see here in the imagery, it is still expanding, it's still growing, and it's looking even more annular. So, and with annular storms in the Atlantic, you know how their history goes, and they do tend to get pretty ugly, quite literally.
So, over the next few days, the National Hurricane Center expects that Irma will become a Category 4 and pass through those islands very close to the islands at that intensity. The first place is going to be, or possibly the first worst place to be affected, is going to be Barbuda by the looks of things. That is the small island next to the 4th M dot on the 2 a.m. Wednesday marker. It's Barbuda and Antigua just to the south. And then you've got the succession of islands just ahead of that. You can see a few little dots scattered about. That's the St. Martin area and the islands around there. I think that includes Anguilla and one other. I think it might be St. Bart's. And then further south you've got St. Eustatius and a few others. And St. Kitts and Nevis. And further to the west, not under any watches or warnings yet, you've got the British and US Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and then just outside of the 3-day cone at the moment is the Dominican Republic and Haiti, which doesn't want another storm after last year. Well, nor does any of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands either, or Cuba indeed. We all remember Matthew still. It's not going to really do a Matthew, so to speak. First of all, it's not formed in the right place, but even if you take its path beyond its Haiti landfall, it doesn't look like it's going to mirror that either, though one of the models yesterday did hint that it would stick to the coast of Florida, but that's just been one outlier in a massive succession of model runs, and it's never come up since. It doesn't look like it's going to ride the east coast of Florida in that way, though some models were hinting that it would actually stall near the or over the Bahamas and then turn towards the north-northwest and stay around 100 miles clear of Florida. But now this morning it would appear that the models are suggesting that it's going to steer into Cuba and then recurve, and it reminds me of a particular hurricane which I can't quite remember. I just want to stock up on the statistics here so I can get that accurately to you. But it reminds me of a particular hurricane that I remember. Yeah, I can't find it at the moment, but there we go.
Well, it's really interesting how the storm is developed, how it basically sort of struggled Like yesterday, for example, its eye basically just fell apart, and now it looks really good, and it's still uncertain exactly if it how big of a threat it is to the United States, but
Now,
um,
Orlando, people are going crazy over model runs, right? The media,
yes.
public,
Uh,
everyone. Any advice for people watching on any tips for the models?
okay. Well, let's get this straight. Anyone who says there's a Cat 7 heading for the United States is a lie.
Haha.
Yeah, just to bring that up, if anyone sees the forecast track saying that, it is obviously fake, report it and ignore it, because whoever's saying that needs to get their heads examined. And I'm being deadly honest, because Category 7 will never exist, and it can't, because Category 5, as the obviously common explanation goes, if it doesn't matter whether it's 160 miles an hour or even 200 miles an hour, the thing is still going to do the exact same amount of damage. So pretty much the wind speeds for a Category 5 hurricane and the damage is pretty much infinite. You cannot go any higher than Cat 5.
Though one of the models did predict 200-mile-an-hour winds.
Well, I would like to also say that whoever says that they know exactly where the storm is going is all.
Yeah, it's also lying as well, because I know that there was also one of the fake tracks was saying that we're going to hit Houston.
Right. Yeah.
No
Well, one
panic
of the
because it was
things.
fake.
One of the things we dislike most in the storm tracking community here, at Force 13 at least, is we really dislike it when people state their opinions as if it is a fact. That is misleading and potentially dangerous, as proved last year.
Yes, because basically, especially with the Atlantic, if you have a big storm such as Irma, and you provide one false information, it could potentially prove, unfortunately, fatal to some people because of that one little bit of false information.
Yeah, it doesn't it doesn't take a big leap just to say,
no,
I think such and such is going to happen. You know, I mean, I think looking at the latest cone that it might hit Cuba, but we don't know for sure, and it might not. That's why we have a forecast cone. You can see on there on the left-hand side, it could go anywhere north or south. The NHC still hinting that it could even go just ever so slightly north of Jamaica, or on the other side, it could strike Nassau, Bahamas, just as Matthew did. So, you know, anything could. But you look at the forecast cone there, the National Hurricane Center is pretty much ruling out completely a recurvature now.
yeah, they're pretty much saying the trough will now no longer grab Irma. I don't know whether they're saying that the trough here. I don't know whether this was supposed to be the trough that was supposed to grab her. If so, then it's completely missed. It's not going to grab her at all. Irma can lie low enough to be out of reach of the trough.
Irma's influence has destroyed that trough.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, I mean, what can you? The only thing you can do is now just to basically sit and hope for the best now, because, and I know areas in this path, it's only gonna get worse from here. Regardless of the storm strength, it doesn't matter what it is. It's still a major hurricane. It's still extremely life-threatening. It's a dangerous hurricane, whichever way you look at it.
And it's getting worse as we speak, of course. And you know, I've always been worried about those islands that are under the hurricane watch right now. I'd suggest at this point that the chances of hurricane force conditions on all of those islands in the watch area are above half chance, and people should be preparing right now if you're on any of those islands under the hurricane watch. And the Virgin Islands, I would say the same thing, and the northern coast of Puerto Rico certainly. The rest of Puerto Rico remains to be seen. We'll see. And potentially the northern coast of the Dominican Republic, just beyond the 3-day scope. 3 days ain't a long time.
Yeah, a lot of people, unfortunately, especially in Cuba, due to their government, might not be able to have that much access to internet. But if you are lucky enough, And if any of you guys are watching, you should get ready for the worst.
Yeah.
All right.
And if I don't know what I wonder. I always wondered. I was going to ask, what was the housing structure like on the Lesser Antilles? I'd imagine it's from some of the hurricanes and tropical storms that I've had there. I've seen it as poor.
I know most of the
Not
homes.
great.
I know most of the homes in Puerto Rico, at least, they're mostly made out of concrete.
But there's some of the homes on the Lesser Antilles from what I've seen from hurricanes and tropical storms that I've had there, they're not really the best built.
Yeah, a lot of them are just shacks overall.
Yeah, I don't really want to cause alarm. But, those sort of built houses. I mean, we've seen this with other countries with other tropical cyclones. They don't stand a chance. Not against Category 1 force hurricane, Category 4 winds, Category 1 force winds or stronger. We've seen that, unfortunately, and there's pretty much Irma is a hurricane that's meaning business from the MDR, and it's one of them hurricanes that is showing that it's definitely not a slouch, even though it's been aggravating storm tracking the last 3 days or so. But just to reiterate, I don't know if there are anyone's rung up
Greg?
fellow disturbances.
We have a question. Do you think Irma will grow to the size models are showing it to be? Now, what size are the models showing it to be? They certainly balloon it up a little bit, especially those more aggressive models like the GFS.
Well, it's hard to tell how big they expect it to grow because their perspective is different. NavGem expects her to grow absolutely giant.
Yeah, well, that often does. What we can tell you is that you got to expect that it will progressively get bigger because that's what happens in storms.
Yeah,
eyewall replacement cycles, when they happen, widens the storm a little bit each time, and a landfall can widen a storm quite a lot.
Yeah, that's another factor. But the thing is, it's strange here is that she's been in that mindset or that frame that she looks like she's been in an eyewall replacement or going to go into another, but microimagery shows that she hasn't. So she is one weird hurricane, but one strong hurricane to be very, very worried about, regardless of behavior, whether it be weird and erratic. But to be honest, sometimes they are the worst hurricanes. They're weird and erratic, but I don't know whether anyone's brought up the other disturbances in the Atlantic besides, obviously, their main focus is Irma. But here's the other disturbance that is behind Irma, the other tropical wave that the NC tagged a couple of days ago, if I'm right. An elongated area of low pressure located several hundred miles southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands continues to produce disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Environmental conditions are expected to become conducive for gradual development, and a tropical depression is likely to form later this week while the system moves west-northwestward at 10 to 15 miles per hour over the tropical Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, and the HWRF thinks that will become a weak tropical storm on approach to the Leeward Islands again, another storm on approach to the Leeward Islands. The HMON model, let's see what it says, just looking here in the studio. You can't see what I'm doing, unfortunately for you. I'm not sure you'd want to, because I'm not particularly well, just in case you've not noticed yet.
Yeah.
But the HMON does predict also a weak tropical storm that recurves well away from the Lesser Antilles. And I saw the other models last night. They said that, well, 2 days ago, one of the models said that the system behind Irma would stall right next to the Virgin Islands, just north of them, for about a day, and then move off to the northeast. Could deliver a little bit of rainfall there.
Yeah, so that's the potential, quote-unquote, 94L potential future Jose possible. But also you have this other disturbance that formed yesterday, in the Gulf of Mexico. A trough of low pressure located over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico is producing disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Environmental conditions are marginally conducive for some slow development of the system while it drifts west-northwestward and remains over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico during the next few days. So pretty much they could be expecting this one to develop it, well, depending on where it affects. Either way, the Gulf Coast, Texas to Louisiana, cannot take any more rainfall, especially after what Harvey, dumped on them. This is pretty much adding insult to injury, rubbing salt in the wounds. You know, how much more of this is, well, actually it's not, that's the wrong thing to really come out and say.
Well, not a certainty yet, but we'll keep on it.
But as it does drift west-northwest, you know, how much more in some areas that, you know, haven't been flooded badly by Harvey, but are very, very close. But obviously you've got the areas like Houston, which are horrifically by Harvey's extreme rainfall. Doesn't really help when he stalls over there for a couple of days or so, and then becomes a tropical, and then re-strengthens over the Gulf of Mexico for a second time. You know, I just hope this one just does not develop at all, and I just hope that this one just blows out, because obviously, as we all know, the Gulf Coast can't take any more rain, and I hope that, you know, obviously, the optimists and all that, we hope that Irma just starts weakening, but with her recent behavior, it's erratic. We don't know what she's doing, whether she's weakening or strengthening, or she's pretty much like a yo-yo.
Oh, we know at the moment, Craig, it's strengthening.
Yeah, from what we know at the minute, yes,
yesterday's discussion was, is it going to strengthen and weaken, as was the day before that, and the day before that. But today it's strengthening.
But to be honest, you know, the question sort of remains today, even from yesterday, is that, you know, she's like a yo-yo. She's literally been going up and down. You know, but to be honest, it's only, as I said, it's only a matter of time before she does get a well-defined eye out. When that happens, that's the next question. I don't know well, nobody knows when that's going to happen, but, you know, if it's anytime soon, you know, hunker down, because this thing's not hanging around anymore. She's not being a slouch anymore. Well, she wasn't a slouch in the first place. She's a major hurricane. She's trying to show what she's worth, but it's, you know, I just don't know anymore. Really, she's one of them hurricanes that's been up and down and very, very erratic and hard to track. This is what makes the Atlantic so dangerous for forecasting, and this is what makes the peak season so dangerous, is that you have so many hurricanes that are so erratic, so unpredictable, especially hurricanes like Irma. You know, they're just unpredictable. You think they'll do one thing, a certain direction, and then it doesn't, or it goes to a certain strength. You think it'll get a certain strength. That's what I mean about peak season, I think, and it's extremely dangerous.
We're running uninterrupted here for a while. I don't know how long for. I'm just setting up the laptop here on my desk, very unprepared. So now that I'm looking at 3 screens, so that I can do the live event a little bit better. Whilst we're not looking at anything on the screen share there, we'll take we'll just show you the graphics from the National Hurricane Center, and it shows you also the tropical storm force wind probabilities. You can see the latest has Florida under around 20%, Cuba under something like 60%. But I wouldn't put too much stock into that at this moment in time. Now, the reason why I've got a laptop here is just to be able to pick up the comments on there so that I can show you more fantastic imagery whilst we're live, because I run out of desks over here. Anyway, there's the latest visible imagery of Irma right now. And you can see its slow progression towards the west, and this imagery takes place over around a 40-minute period. So you can see how much the storm has managed to evolve in 40 minutes. And it updates every minute manually, unfortunately, so only when I update it you'll be able to see the latest. But throughout this broadcast you'll see more as that imagery progresses. And of course we've also got Craig's imagery too, which looks like that, showing us the infrared version of what I'm showing.
Yeah, you can just see how the last few frames, this eye is just really improved now. This thing is now looking, I don't know what Satops would say for that, but it's certainly looking.
Yeah, well, it if it sustains that look for a little while, it should be 130 miles an hour category 4. That is, at the moment, I would be expecting that at the next National Hurricane Center update. The latest from nearly an hour ago says 120 miles an hour.
Here's a zoomed out, well, just scrolled out to zoom out on the imagery. You can see just look how much she has grown. You know, and there's no signs of a second eyeball starting to, or second eye starting to show through it. I mean, I know she's been trying to go annular and all that, but you know, this is impressive how she's just expanded over, say, the last, well, pretty much all morning and all start of the afternoon and continuing. She's grown quite from pretty much a very, very small hurricane yesterday to a pretty decent sized hurricane.
Right, but the models said that would happen.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure that it's a particularly big storm yet.
No.
In that sense, it is still fairly small as hurricanes go, but it will pack a punch when it reaches those islands. I think we've just got some news here, Craig, that Invest 94L has been activated. Is that new?
I would not be, but well, to be honest, I don't know. But if anything is to go by, I wouldn't really be surprised.
Yeah, well, we were expecting it, but I think that is breaking news. It has certainly formed. Invest 94L is with us, but how long has it been with us? That just happened.
I think that's just happened. Let me just see on the RAM. Yeah, it's just happened. 12 Z's out, and it's just happened.
So the area of interest that Craig was talking about earlier, that's behind Irma, that's just been tagged Invest 94, and when an Invest system is activated, that means that they're watching it, and for any potential development. And now we've got a phone call. Wonderful here in the studio. Very fresh.
Sure, it's not the National Hurricane Center telling you this. Yeah, so you can see as of recent news. So here's 94L. There's the current formation chances as I read out the description and the advisory AOI statement. Formation chance in the 48 hours, the next 2 days is 30%, which is low. Formation chance in the next 5 days is high, 70%, but it did go down to 60% yesterday, but it did go straight back up to 70 afterwards.
I don't know if this is like new or anything, but I was looking at the floaters by the not the National Hurricane, but NOAA, and it seems that it's actually moving a little bit to the north of the forecast points.
Wouldn't surprise me. There's the latest image. You can see there the eye, I guess, starting to get a lot clearer and a lot more well defined. It's really disconcerting to look at. It's not the most pleasant thing to look at when you know, or when you've got the general idea from the AST and the models that it could hit land. Those are pretty darn strong hurricane. This is just, it looks to be improving now, and it looks to be on the road to improving, but for how long? because Irma has been up and down. So I'm willing to watch this
Yeah.
to see the eye in the last few frames. It's definitely gotten clearer. It's definitely gotten bigger. You can see how it's progressed as.
Yeah, apologies for the earlier
You can see
interruption
how there-
when I was interrupted by the phone call.
Brutally by
Yeah, it was rude. Yeah, it was very rude. I just wanna I wanted to take some comments actually because there were some.
Yes.
First of all, Stephen wanted to know how long the live stream is going to go on for. Well, I can't answer that question. There's us, by the way.
Nope.
I can't answer that question at the moment because I don't know. I don't know how we'll be feeling on the air. I expect that we're going to be taking a break at some point for an hour or two. We'll certainly be doing significant updates on this storm in the evening, obviously when it's peak times over in the areas affected. But during the day, we're probably going to be doing short stints. I mean, we've been here so far for about 40 minutes. So we'll just see how it goes. But again, there's the images of where the storm's expected to go. Okay, I think there was some more questions. Someone for some reason wanted to know what Saffir-Simpson category was a 909 millibar storm. Well, the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale isn't defined by its pressure, but usually it means a category 5. Elsewhere, what else do we have here?
And Nathan, just to jump in, Recon has found on their radar, the radar plane has looked to have found a secondary eye wall in Irma. I'm going to try and get an image of it and try and bring it up. But so I've just been sent the image of it. So here it is. I'll just go with the image of it. So let's see if we can bring up the screen share on it, which would help very nicely.
Would rather.
So here you can see here's the main eye.
Now this
and
is
then
Recon
around it,
Radar.
Yep, that's the reconnaissance plane radar. So here you can see this. So here you can see the secondary eye wall. This is the brand new eye, so it's bigger. And here's the old eye. It's pretty much near enough ready to go. The old eye, you can see how the rain bands in it are pretty much broken. They're near enough ready to die out, so that we could pretty much be getting.
So you're saying we're going to have
bigger
another
eye.
eye wall replacement cycle?
Oh my gosh.
Again.
Well, actually, I'm going to go through the microwave imagery here, just to show that, because I know
Right.
some folk have been saying an eye wall replacement, but here is one of the images of Irma from last night when it just reached. This is it. This doesn't really show an eye wall replacement. This shows it trying to go annular. You see how the large eye is there and the structure's trying to expand. So this is pretty much the point where she tried to expand. So from here onwards, if Arch can speed up, because here going backwards, there's been no real signs of an eye wall replacement. The eye wall just completely breaks in that image when it lost major hurricane strength again for many times. And then here in this image, after the image I just showed, this is it when the Recon had just entered it and found 150 miles an hour. So you can see how the structure there has improved drastically from the last image before that. So you can see how the spiral bands on there are pretty much gone. Here's this morning's imagery. So pretty much it was trying to form a smaller eye, because you can see how the small little blue area trying to wrap around. So it was trying to form a smaller eye, but this bigger section, I wouldn't even call this a secondary eye wall yet until it closed off. Here is pretty much touch and go whether this is a brand new eye, but looking at it now, it looks to be a brand new eye, helping to strengthen the structure, because you can see here the structure had actually improved drastically as well, also, and changed. So.
We have some eye questions, Craig.
Oh God.
What is the record for most eye wall replacement cycles?
I honestly have no idea.
No, it'll be a long-lasting storm, no doubt. Take a look at storms
Yeah.
like Aoki and John and maybe Faith. I don't know. We
The
don't
most
know.
eye wall replacements
I reckon
probably
Typhoon
seen-
Rita had a lot of eye wall replacement cycles. It
Yeah,
reached
that's
Category
true.
2 status on 7 different occasions. That's the record for that particular stat.
that would probably be the record amount of eye wall replacements.
Maybe. And people want to know about the eye temperature in Irma right now. I only have data as of 30 minutes ago, and as of then it was minus... probably it's difficult to tell. About minus
See,
46.
This is how hard
About minus 46, which isn't great.
ADT says it's now in the positives,
They think it's
according to the eye temperature.
Really?
Yeah, ADT says it's plus 1 degree.
Well,
and
two
it's
hours ago,
plus-
2 hours ago it was minus 10.
Hmm.
And at the moment it's just difficult to triangulate the position.
That's pretty much it.
But actually it did look pretty good before. It just might be falling apart a little bit. It was actually minus 0.6 an hour ago.
So that might explain why the eye's been trying to falter. Damn it, Irma!
Well, it would appear to be faltering at this time. Do you agree?
Yes. Wow, I need to see what the new IR image says.
Let's see
If it does start to show a secondary eye wall, don't write it off. Don't say that the storm's going to die from that.
Let's see if we have new
because
visible.
Obviously,
Here's the latest on the visible.
it doesn't look like it because it's trying to blow up the cloud tops and it's trying to improve the eye.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Irma,
Yeah, we're looking at the latest imagery here, which is more recent than what I was looking at
Yeah.
from 30 minutes ago, and it does look much better in these frames, you know. The eastern side and southeastern side, the eye wall is blowing up, and it looks to me as though the eye is clearing rather than clouding.
Irma cannot hurricane right.
Yeah, well, you know.
But then
can
again,
you
it's one of
say?
them weird hurricanes. But to be honest, I'd imagine soon the brand new eye should now
But
should
I
be sorry.
I think we all agree that that this is intensifying.
Yes, this is actually getting stronger. But after the eye wall replacement, it might maintain intensity for a little while, depending on how quick it gets it done, and then start blowing up again. Well, quote unquote, that's what's supposed to normally happen, but it's touch and go because sometimes it can die, sometimes it can strengthen. But you'd normally expect this to strengthen because of the amount of time it's got. But with Irma, big question marks, very big question marks.
So, how far? Well, not how far, but what do you think of Irma possible tracks? Like, which one do you see as the most likely currently?
Well, I've always agreed with the National Hurricane Center cone, and I still don't see any reason why not to agree with the same cone. So either a brush with Cuba or a landfall in Cuba. I think that obviously the Leeward Islands gonna have some real trouble. The Turks and Caicos Islands and the Bahamas might have some real trouble as well. Turks and Caicos Islands especially. The northern Bahamas, which I understand to be most populated, maybe not so much, but we'll see.
Let's have a look. And I'm going to try and see what the intensity forecast now is, see if they've changed the intensity. No,
No.
probably.
They don't. They only do that at the full advisory. The next one coming up in 2
that's
hours.
only 28.
All right. Well, let's see if we've got any more questions. If you do have any more questions for us, we're right here for you. It sort of keeps us going here. I mean, what sort of service can we do if it's not for the viewer? And I find it a bit silly sometimes when in this sort of situation where, you know, the viewer is important. that some people don't take questions, but we take any questions that you send us, pretty much. That's relevant. Anyway, there's the latest visible imagery, and Irma's still looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Sooner or later you will start to see the islands appear on this graphic. I'll try and get you some context as to how far from the islands the storm is right now with some more imagery, but in the meantime, I don't know if you guys want to talk about anything whilst I find that.
Well, the storm itself is getting really, really, really good looking overall, and the ice seems to be clearing out currently. But if this trend continues, it's really going to be a disaster for the Lesser Antilles, not for the central or southern ones, but more towards Puerto Rico and the Greater Antilles. Um, Overall, it's supposed to get really, really bad there, and if any of our viewers currently are in that vicinity, you should get ready as fast as possible because your time is running out, and it's running out fast.
Technical issues when an important update needs to be done.
Anyway, I should start talking with my microphone on for once.
Yes.
Because that whole passage there was without the microphone, so that was quite dumb of me. Anyway, I'll talk over that all over again. You're looking at Irma beginning to appear on the scope on the right-hand side of that imagery towards those islands, slowly but surely. What you're seeing on the right-hand side is the peripheral band appearing and closing in on those islands, so already they're going to start to feel some effects of this, probably tonight, from the first peripheral bands. Probably deliver a little bit of light to moderate rainfall, maybe some squallish winds, but the storm proper is still some distance away. I was going to take some questions, but there wasn't any particular questions. Only one about David. David's doing fine. He is in bed right now, most likely, over in Australia. He'll probably join us later this evening. But yeah, that's just the imagery that I wanted to show up there. Craig, what are your thoughts?
Well, the disturbance in the Bay of Campeche, well, it's pretty much doing near enough nothing at the minute. Irma being confusing and annoying as always, but getting very concerning. And conditions are only going to get worse, and she's looking even better. Instead of supposedly having the new eye wall taking effect, looking at that.
More questions thick and fast here, Craig. should we be worried in New York City? Not likely. What you could possibly get over there and anywhere along the East Coast, it's looking unlikely now that this storm will recurve and strike the East Coast near a maximum intensity, but it could wind up through the East Coast as a, it could, it could still be a minimal hurricane along the southeastern states, depending on where it goes. But by the time it gets towards New York, you're looking at tropical storm at most, and it would be rather unlucky if that tropical storm was to wind up exactly right over New York City. But I really don't think there's going to be anything significant. Certainly no Category 5 in New York City, like I think one source said on YouTube, which is wonderful. Also, is it going to hit Florida? Well, we're looking at it right now. It is beyond the 5-day scope, is all I can say, but at the moment southern Florida should be concerned for a potential impact, and indeed western Florida as well should be concerned of a potential impact, as several models are suggesting that the storm will now track into Cuba and then through the Keys maybe, and then through the Everglades and along the western coast inland, and then maybe off towards the Atlantic. So we don't know exactly where, when and how this might hit Florida, or what intensity, because it's so far into the future at this point. I mean, 6 days is like a flash in the distant future in storm forecasting. A hell of a lot can change in that time. We knew that with Matthew, after all. At the moment, we're really focusing on the Caribbean, and we can't do much more than speculate about Florida. But everyone watching in Florida should just be making those initial preparations. Is Category 5 possible? Yes, it's very possible, and myself and Devon in recent days have been saying that it's more likely than not that the storm will reach Category 5. The big question right now at this moment in time is whether it will reach Category 5 before reaching those islands, because if it does, the potential impacts will be catastrophic. If it reaches Category 5 after the islands, indeed, on approach to the Turks and Caicos Islands, on approach to Cuba, as several models have indicated in the last 24 hours, that could also be terrible. At the moment, anyone who's wondering about the very worst, Category 5 landfall in the United States, looks very unlikely. It's very difficult to get a Category 5 to make landfall in the United States. And the last one would have been Andrew, wouldn't it? Am I right in that?
I imagine you would be.
I hope so. But there's very, very few storms that do that. Though, of course, I mean, you look at this forecast track, you might consider the Labor Day hurricane of 1935, which made landfall on the Florida Keys as a Category 5 with a pressure of 892 millibars. Goes to show what's possible in that area, but by no means are we suggesting that that is what's going to occur, and at the moment only one model is suggesting anything like that, and that's the wacky GFS, which predicted that Typhoon Noru earlier this year would be the strongest, would be the most intense storm in the world history, and that did not happen. So the GFS is quite crying wolf on a massive scale. One day it might be right, but at the moment it doesn't look like it's going to verify with this yet. Okay, let's see what we've got now. How concerned should we be in Haiti, and what preparations should we take? Well, I don't know too much about Haiti because it's such a, what we gather is it's such a poverty-stricken country, and the construction of buildings there is very poor. If the forecast verifies right now, you've got a major hurricane passing about 100 miles or so north of Haiti, which is bad, because the northern part of Haiti there will then receive significant winds, tropical storm force almost guaranteed, hurricane force gusts perhaps, and the northern coast of Haiti stretching inland could have a raw deal from this storm again. Southern Haiti won't be as bad, but rainfall amounts could total up there, and you could again see some issues. Okay, questions about Pennsylvania. Will it hit in Pennsylvania? Again, we're not looking at a strong storm to impact the northern, to impact the northeast. Anything that will happen in Pennsylvania, New York area, New England, anywhere like that, anywhere north of Virginia, you're looking at residual winds, maybe tropical storm force strength at worst. Could be some significant rainfall. That's if the storm even goes there. It might not. It could do absolutely anything at this point. It could dissipate long before, then stall further south, move out to sea, and do a whole manner of different things. In the meantime, I don't think we have anything else right now. So Craig, what are your thoughts at this moment in time as we cross back to the visible?
Gosh, she's still improving. That's the worrying thing. So that then begs the question, where the heck's the secondary eyeball? Unless the warming of the clouds to the south, it might be the start of the brand new eyewall starting to show through. But the thing is, it's been near enough all the time, but it's hard to tell with Irma. It really is hard to tell. And looking at the latest frame of the IR, the eye looks to be getting better. It's going to be touch and go whether this eyewall replacement happens soon. It probably will, depending on how quick this new eyewall develops. If it does develop quickly enough, but if it does, then that means the eyewall replacement will be started sooner and ended quicker. In terms of land impacts, that's not good at all. That's pretty darn bad. In fact, that's beyond bad. That's horrific if that were to happen. Because it would allow the storm to recover and allow the storm to, have another release of somewhat life, seeing as how it's basically had its 1 billionth eye. But once it's done, if it does do the eyeball replacement soon, as I've said, it probably will end up getting the time to recover, because it still has time to do it and to recover, and then re-strengthen if it does lose any intensity, which it probably will, but might not be effective for long enough to be put down in advisories. But regardless of it, an eyewall replacement doesn't mean the storm is going to die.
You think that's happening now?
It could be, because it looks like by the structure and you know how it's been expanding, that could be the reason why.
But it doesn't look like an eyewall replacement cycle, Craig. The eye appears to be improving.
Yeah, that's the thing that's confusing, is that the storm's expanded, but yet the main eye is not going away. But looking at IR, there's a little bit more cloud on it, and the eye looks like what you would basically, what could be known as like a half moon in terms, because there is a little bit of convection going in the eye, but there's no signs of, as I've said, is the new eye showing. But that's what's confusing, is that the storm's expanded, but there's no brand new eye wall yet showing through, and the old eye isn't dying. So Irma is very confusing, a very weird hurricane. But you'd imagine if there is an eye wall forecast, or a forecast being picked up by Recon Radar, you would expect it to start happening soon, because going by the image that I saw, the new eye wall looked to be strong, and looking to be stronger than the main one.
What are your thoughts on whether it will gain annular characteristics and etc.?
Well, looking at it right now, it looks to be already gaining annular characteristics, or at least trying to. It's hard to tell, but it looks like there is more annular characteristics as it's going on. But it would probably normally go for it. What normally happens with a storm that goes annular or tries to go annular is that it does an hour replacement. Sometimes it can fail it, and then it goes annular that way, or it just does it and goes annular in general. So there's two choices that it basically has in terms of going annular. It fails the IO replacement and goes annular that way, or it completes the IO replacement and then goes annular. Just decides to go annular on its own by its structure change. It's weird in how an annular cyclone develops and how it goes annular, mainly because they're so rare and they're not really that well documented. But they're pretty interesting to watch, and I think they, Irma, among many other having more studies put into them.
Yeah, now we're looking at the latest, well, not so much latest, but a progression of imagery of Irma, how it's been going since around 4 a.m. UTC, which would have been, which is around 9 hours ago. So this is imagery of the last 9 hours up until now, and you can see how the storm's been progressing. What we look for in these systems, you see the eye popping out in those latest frames. The eye looks decent in that last frame. And the next thing we look for is the eye wall. If we want to see a red ring all the way around the eye wall, which would usually mean winds of 140 miles an hour. As you can see on the latest images, the red ring isn't quite there yet, but I think it's enough to call this 130 miles an hour category 4. That's probably what the National Hurricane Center will go with at the next advisory in 2 hours. If it maintains its appearance, if the eye wall replacement cycle starts again, another one, it's like the 5th or the 6th, maybe 7th, the National Hurricane Center will probably keep it as a Category 3, 120, maybe 125. But at the moment it's looking impressive, and I don't yet see signs of an eye wall replacement cycle, Craig, if I'm being honest.
Not yet in terms of eye, but structure. You would probably say, as you said at the start of the show, or the update, the structure has been expanding, which normally does happen with eye wall replacements. But radar, as we all know, on Recon, what radar tells us and what microwave imagery tells us unfortunately doesn't lie. But it takes the eye wall replacements do take their time to come through. But eye wall replacement, it's still bad to say the least, because it puts it into a bad predicament, because it happens during landfall. You have that small chance, you have that good chance that it might die quicker, which would be nice if it did die. But if it does it now, then it's got the higher chance that it will recover and re-strengthen rapidly or gradually. But going with the SSTs, actually, I suggest to have a look at SSTs. It might be the wise.
Whilst you do that, I want to take some more questions. One on Facebook, actually. You can send us a message on Facebook, or you can find our outlet. Just search Force 13 all in text, you'll find it there. We're also on Twitter at Force 13. On Facebook, Vernon asks us, we're on St Kitts and Nevis, any idea of wind speeds when it hits us tomorrow or Wednesday? Well, St Kitts is one of the islands just on the... I'd sort of divide those two areas under the Hurricane Watch, the pink outline there, into two. And St Kitts is in that southern group there, on the western side somewhere, I believe. Under the Hurricane Watch. I'd suggest there that you've probably got about a 50% chance of hurricane force winds when it gets there, maybe a little bit more. I would be preparing for hurricane conditions over there, and obviously heavy rainfall which will accompany it, and it won't have the worst deal of all of the islands. I think that will belong with Barbuda and potentially St Martin and Anguilla, and possibly the northern British Virgin Islands as well. I remember in particular during Hurricane Earl, which passed ever so close to Anegada, which is the northernmost island of the British Virgin Islands, back in 2010. The island, I think, miraculously survived, so to speak, without too much damage. We'll probably be watching that again pretty soon in a few days. But all of those islands there in the Hurricane Watch, I think, have a more than half chance of hurricane force conditions. Well, let's see if we've got any more questions at this moment in time. If not, you can send us a message at Force 13, all in text in the comments, which are looking very fun right now. And if you've got any questions, just start your message with Force 13. It'll light up for me, which will be very nice. But in the meantime, we'll just keep up the coverage, and Craig's got the sea surface temperatures.
Yeah, so here you can see the, obviously, as Nathan said, the sea surface temperatures that are in the Atlantic as of 06Z according to Tropical Tidbits. Well, the Atlantic's been getting warmer, as you can see. There was a cool pocket of around 29 degrees north of Puerto Rico and Haiti, along with, but that has now pretty much diminished and warmed up. So where Irma is right now, the SSTs are only going to get warmer.
Now that's always been a concern, because sea surface temperatures are ever increasing as Irma continues towards the west.
Yeah. That's what also concerns me, and that's what possibly puts, I don't want to cause alarm when I say this, Category 5 into contention, because as warmer it goes, the warmer the sea surface temperature gets as it moves along, and the stronger it gets. It's already 120 miles an hour, and it's, say, about 29 degree waters already, about there. And it looks to be getting ready to hit an area of low 30 degree, maybe high 29s. So, you know, how strong or how quick could Irma ramp up before a lesser Antilles landfall, if it does make one, on any of the small islands? So that's now going to be the sort of question of how strong could it be, and when could the eyewall replacement actually start in Irma? But then again, obviously the main question is how strong will it get when it does complete its eyewall replacement, if it does one. This is looking at the sea surface temperatures, even when at the point when it gets to the Bahamas. I mean, look at how warm the SSTs are there. High 30s pushing 32 degrees. That in itself is it's not most comforting sight to be seeing. But,
yeah.
You know, God knows what could happen when Irma hits that.
It's what we're looking at, because we've not really had much going on in those areas this year so far.
Yeah, and pretty much they could be getting, well, and might be getting warmer as they might be expanding in terms of the SSTs, which could be the case north of Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. You know, that could be the case. The 30-degree area of warm waters in the Bahamas could be spreading out, which, if that does play out, yeah, well, you can already see what Irma might become. Irma might become an absolute monster hurricane. Not saying that it isn't already, because it is, but you know, it could get even stronger than what it
Tell us
is.
briefly how strong you think Irma will get before the islands and after the islands.
If it keeps up its current state right now, I would probably say Category 4 hurricane, maybe low range Cat 4. At the strongest, I would go
really
100.
Well, I'm surprised by that, because I think it's there already.
Yeah, I would say. Well, that's what I was saying. I was saying that it could get to Category 4, low range Cat 4. 130 miles an hour. But obviously the main question is...
I think it's there already, Craig. So you think it won't intensify any further before reaching the islands?
Well, I've also got that eyewall replacement that's still on the radar on that Recon. So
you're betting on the eyewall replacement cycle, and so is everyone else on the islands, by the way.
Yes.
They don't want a Category 4.
the thing is that there is going to be touch and go whether that Iowa replacement does occur, because as the recent storms that have been trying to do Iowa replacement somehow have ended up miraculously either doing them very, very quickly and recovering, and getting to rather scary strengths, or fighting Iowa replacements and not doing them at all, and
Right.
strengthening even further. So it's going to be touch and go what Irma does, but I think it could get to Category 4.
I think what is pretty assured as it could possibly be, really, is that you look at the projected track there, the National Hurricane Center forecast, which will update in 2 hours, by the way. They think it will be a major hurricane all the way to Cuba. I can't disagree with that at all.
No.
They think it will become 140 miles an hour. I think at the point that the 140 mile an hour point occurs on what looks to be Wednesday into Thursday. So yeah, when it's making the closest approach to the Leeward Islands and to Puerto Rico is when the National Hurricane Center currently thinks it will peak 140 miles an hour. Now, I think it could go higher than that. Obviously, we don't want it to, but the model's suggesting that it could possibly get near or to Category 5 status. However, if the storm does move further south, if it strikes Puerto Rico, if it strikes Hispaniola, then the storm will weaken much more, and if it does strike those islands, and by that I mean get within about 50 miles or less, enough for the land interaction to really get into Irma, then when by the time it gets to the Bahamas, Cuba, Florida,
it's pretty much running out of puff.
It may well be a much weaker hurricane, but people living in those areas can't rely on that to verify.
No.
At the moment, we could have anything from Category 2 to strong Category 4 by the time it gets to Cuba and Florida. But it is interesting to see what the models are saying right now. The trend is that the models are suggesting that maybe it's going to make landfall in Cuba, then curve into Florida. In fact, we've got the spaghetti runs here, which is what we like to call them. I didn't coin that term, by the way. I'm going to show that in just a moment as soon as I can get it on the screen. We have to work very hard with our technical stuff here. This is one of my favourite graphics to show you how much of a disagreement there can be across all of the models. Here is the latest from Irma. What you see there is several different model runs which all disagree with each other, but you sort of try and get a consensus, and what the consensus says right now suggests to us that the storm will move pretty much through the southern Turks and Caicos Islands, potential landfall in Cuba, majority of them are saying that, and then zipping north there into Florida. Beyond there it gets very, very uncertain, and you can see all those outliers there in those grey lines, some going as far as the Central Gulf, some going as far east as the Outer Banks. And all points in between. So realistically, the amount of uncertainty there is quite a huge area. In the meantime, we're only really talking with much certainty about the Leeward Islands, Lesser Antilles, the northernmost ones, the ones that are in the hurricane watch right now, and that's pretty much assured, I'm afraid. The hurricane force conditions are going to occur on those islands. Maybe not so much in the Virgin Islands. Remains to be seen for Puerto Rico. Very much remains to be seen in Hispaniola. Cuba, chances are going up. However, if the CMC is right, then the CMC thinks it's going to move through the Bahamas without striking Cuba, and then into southeastern Florida. So, Craig, what are your thoughts on the model consensus, and do you think it's right, and do you think it will shift again?
Well, if it shifts again, depending on which direction and how far south could this thing go, and how this general consensus does take it into Cuba, or even does take it into Cuba and then Florida afterwards, or just takes it into Florida. Either way you look at it, you're still looking at a potential disaster unfolding. Because you've got a major hurricane. Obviously some of them do need to turn off the taps and up and stop on up in the ante, and going too far with Irma. But the thing is, some of them, sure, yep, they're saying category of it can be a little bit stupid, but that's not ruled out. I'm not ruling out a category 5 peak. Category 4 is certainly in there as well, but either way you look at it, you could still have a major hurricane regardless of strength, cat 5, 4, or even 3. You could still have a major hurricane on your doorstep and potentially going to deliver heavy damage or extreme conditions and catastrophic damage depending on where it hits. Cuba, I know they're no strangers to major hurricanes, and I know they're mountainous, but I've seen what hurricanes can do to Cuba, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, I have to agree on that part because this thing could get really, really bad, especially for the Greater Antilles and the Northern Lesser Antilles. And unfortunately, there's not really that much time left for the Lesser Antilles to prepare.
Yeah.
But they have known about this for a long time, and
yeah,
they should be heeding the preparations. I don't know what it's like down there. If anyone is there watching right now, do let us know what preparations are like over there. But all of those areas in Hurricane Watch, at the very least, has to be prepared for hurricane conditions, because it's looking likely, almost certain, that hurricane force conditions will occur on most of those islands, if not all. And the Virgin Islands will be next, and they should also be preparing, and I expect that the hurricane watches will fall into place there soon too, and hurricane warnings will probably be issued for those watch areas before the maybe by lunchtime local time, who knows. I would certainly I'd put warnings in effect at the next advisory. That's coming up, by the way, in 90 minutes, and we will cover the latest information as soon as it comes out. Let's see if we can get back to the latest visible imagery, unless you guys want to show anything.
Latest IR.
Yeah.
Shows the eye's got a little bit of convection in it, but that's. But looking at it as it's progressed, you can see how the little areas of convection have withered away inside of the eye. So this eye is pretty much still looking like it's going to get clearer. It's a very tight eye, so it still shows signs it is getting stronger, which is not good for land areas. But I mean, I just hope that this, but the thing is that I don't want to get hung up on this eye wall replacement too much.
Yeah.
Because it not happen at all. As I described, because some hurricanes do tend to have a little bit of argy-bargy with its eye wall replacement, but not do it at all. Some just go ahead and do it. But Irma might be that hurricane that doesn't want to do it, and just decides to keep going the way it's going. But you never know with Irma, because she's so unpredictable. And that's what makes her so dangerous.
Let's get the visible imagery back. Here's the latest. So, again, movement still seems to be just south of west. The eye's still looking good. No signs of an eye wall replacement cycle, Craig, sorry.
And looking at the latest image, yeah, this Irma has been one of them hurricanes that's being pernicated. It shows signs of one, but it's not wanting to try and do one.
Do you have any indication of what the eye temperature is right now? For those who don't know, we look at eye temperature is one of the factors that we look at when trying to discern the intensity of a storm. Now, there's only so many observations you can make from the satellites, but obviously the recon flights to the planes that they fly into the storm is usually better than the satellite observations. So first and foremost, we go by what they say. And actually, Craig, is there anyone in the storm right now, or is that coming up later today?
I think there should have been there's a recon in there right now, but I don't know whether they're finished. I don't know whether they're finished.
Well, they were in there at the start of the show, weren't they? When it was around 9.
Yeah.
Got a pressure of 944.
They got 947 on drop zone. That was around the same time Jason reported that they were recording 944. So I think they might be leaving the storm by the looks of it, but they might not. They might be doing another pass.
It looks like they've done a lot in there, so they're probably going to be leaving now.
They've done about, 11 passes or 11 drop zone areas.
Wow.
So I think they would be done because they've been in there pretty much all morning. So it wouldn't really surprise me if they were leaving to go back and refuel and then probably come back out later on this evening. So it's going to be interesting to see what Recon finds.
Yeah, it certainly will. That takes precedent over satellite observations, but since they're gone now, it would appear that Irma has continued to intensify since they were in there. It would suggest to me, guys, that this would be a Category 4 at this point. We will wait for the National Hurricane Center to confirm or deny that at their update, which comes in around 90 minutes. But we're looking at its presentation. Say again?
You can see how in the last few frames of the IR, you can see how the eye's actually gotten clearer and how the cloud tops are cooling around the eye. But it looks to be there that see how these warmer areas of the eye, I don't know whether that's the eye still trying to expand or not, but it might not be. It might just be the way the eye wall is positioned, or just the way the satellite is at the tilt, because it's not directly over Irma. You can see how just a little bit off to the left of Irma, and Irma is just off to the right of Go 16's main focus. See, it's good enough. It's a good enough sight to see from Go 16. So looking at it, the eye is still improving. Still getting clearer by the looks of it. But I don't know whether it's gotten smaller, but it might not have. It doesn't look like it too much, because it looks like this area here, right where my mouse is, it looks to be another area of the eye trying to grow. So, Irma, I have no idea what she's trying to do, but I know from what we all know from reconnaissance that she's strengthening. And is strengthening, but it could be getting even stronger.
Yeah, certainly looks like it. Though the eye wall replacement cycle could come at any time. It does weaken the storm initially, and usually, if conditions are still favourable, the storm then goes on to intensify further. So we'll wait and see whether that happens. As you can see on the scope of the satellite, still the land areas aren't in the area yet, but you know, the land areas aren't too far off the western edge of this image. It is starting to get closer. We're not going to be looking at hurricane force conditions being seen on any land areas yet. Not for some time. Not for about 24 hours at the very least before the Leeward Islands start to get affected by this. And then beyond. So today's stream won't be particularly long, I regret to tell you, but we'll most likely be with some more live streaming for you later this evening on Irma as the threat begins to materialize, as it gets closer to those islands. And obviously we will probably run 24-hour coverage of the storm beginning on Tuesday. But I did intend that we'd only be here for a short update this morning before we went back to it later on today. But there we are with the latest satellite imagery, and until the next update, there's not too much else to say. So if anyone's got any questions, start your message with Force 13 all in text and the content of your question, and then we'll do our best to respond. A lot of people, I can tell you right now, just small things about who's going to be affected and when. If we take a look at the National Hurricane Center forecast graphic, you can see that the fourth M dot there, the major hurricane dot, for 2 a.m. on Wednesday, shows the storm right next to the small island of Barbuda. That's the island right next to the dot there. Antigua to the south of it, and then you've got to the northwest, the northwestern areas under the hurricane watch. That's Anguilla, as well as St. Martin, and I think it's St. Bart's, but I'm not quite sure. Further south you've got St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Eustatius, and I think Montserrat's there as well. And those are pretty much all of the areas under the hurricane watch, and they'll be upgraded to hurricane warnings before long. What's your opinion of the GFS suggesting an 895 millibar landfall in South Florida? All I can tell you is that yesterday the GFS said that it would be an 870 something millibar landfall in North Carolina. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think the GFS can be thrown out the window at every update, to be honest. I think it's absolutely nuts and crazy. It also predicted the most intense storm in the world, Noru, to reach 865 millibars. It predicted it. It predicted it.
I know, but let's not go there.
I've got to go there to prove to back my point that the GFS should not be taken seriously at all.
But
I don't think any of the models should actually be taken seriously.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I know the
then again, the HMON earlier today did say 869.
The HMON model did even worse. Last night's HMON model said that Irma would reach a pressure of 857 millibars. That's not going to happen either. Yes, these are ridiculous model runs that are coming out, not to be believed at all.
69.
That's probably another one.
The last image that I was
not to be believed at all. What the best thing? Stop interrupting me. The best thing to look at right now is the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone and the intensities that they're predicting. They look at the models just as everyone else does, and they add weight and deduct weight from particular model runs and come to a consensus in their forecast philosophy. And they say at the moment 140 miles an hour peak on Wednesday into Thursday. And as I was saying, the Virgin Islands, they're going to be affected as well, definitely, I would think. Tropical storm force winds a certainty, hurricane force winds a distinct possibility on Wednesday night. So they'll be under a hurricane watch very soon. Puerto Rico will probably get tropical storm force winds. Hurricane winds, maybe not. We'll see about that. That's Wednesday night into Thursday. Hispaniola, the northern coast in particular, Dominican Republic, that's on Thursday during the day. Northern Haiti, that'll be Thursday evening into Friday early hours. The Turks and Caicos Islands, Thursday evening into Friday early hours. The southeastern Bahamas, Friday morning into Saturday. Cuba, where depending on where you are, effects will begin on Cuba on Friday morning into the afternoon and will likely persist in parts of Cuba until Saturday, Sunday, maybe even Monday, looking at the forecast. Florida is still outside of the 5-day cone, so I struggle to comment on that too much. But Florida, I would suggest at the moment, is something for next week. Sunday at the earliest, Monday most likely. Craig?
Looking at the latest image of Irma right now, the high minus 70s are trying to wrap around the northern eye wall, and cooler clouds are going around the southern eye wall, and the eye wall just looks to be contracting, meaning the storm could be getting stronger. I don't really want to. I hope that's not really the case, but it might be, because the eye wall does look a lot clearer than what it was. Not really much convection, well, cloud in it being picked up by IR imagery, because the lowest cloud top inside of the eye right now is around -40, and looking like it's getting warmer. So the eye could be, could be on the road to getting clearer and clearer. How clear it remains to be seen, but it's still. I would probably now say that it has reached Category 4, as you said, Nathan. I would agree that this thing has probably now reached Category 4.
Yeah, obviously that's unofficial. We're waiting for the official analysis, but I'd certainly agree with that. It looks like a Category 4 at this point. And still people asking lots of questions about US effects. I mean, along the coast of Florida, East Coast remains to be seen. If I could possibly bring it back to the models that we were looking at before, the model spread, which will tell you with a bit more clarity on how uncertain it is, ironically, of what to expect in terms of potential directions. I'm just getting that up here. It's taking a little while. Here it is. The latest model spread. Now there's a little update. Factors in several different models. There's a whole raft of them there. Includes the HWRF, the HMON, the National Hurricane Centre's official track, the CMC, the UK Met, the GFS, did I mention that already? GFS is on there too. The NAM, all of these models, the NavGem, I mean, it's probably gobbledygook to people who don't know the model names, but they're all on there. And
yes,
you can see that there's pretty much a consensus there for the storm pretty much to follow the National Hurricane Centre's cone. Beyond the National Hurricane Centre's cone, 5 days out, you're looking at potential, some models have it grazing the northern coast of Cuba, then into Florida, pretty much on its southern tip of the mainland, and through the Keys as well, of course. Some models say that it will just about emerge on the southern side of Cuba before going back in and then north, and some of the models are suggesting possibly a landfall maybe in the Naples-Fort Myers area, but we really can't be that specific yet at all. And then you look at the outliers. I mean, the westernmost outlier has the storm going all the way across to the western tip of Cuba pretty much, and then turning north into the western panhandle of Florida. The easternmost has it recurving all the way away from all of the islands pretty much, and then affecting the outer banks of North Carolina. But the vast majority have it going either into Florida or west of Florida, looking at that. What we can pretty much rule out is that the storm is going to go to Texas. We can pretty much rule out that. Pretty much. It would be astronomical odds against that Irma is going to do anything like Ike or anything like that.
Yes.
But there is definitely the potential, and a bad potential, for this storm to do something like... I mean, what storms could you possibly compare this to, Craig? I mean, the early stages of it are a bit like Ike until the Cuba landfall, but after that the similarities end.
Yeah, that's probably the only time you probably compare it to Ike, but that would be about it.
Comparisons to Matthew aren't allowed.
No.
And yeah, I can't actually think of any comparative storms right now, but there you go. I'll try and find some, because it is important. What I'm going to do right now is go and find the best analogues for this storm. By analogues, what I'm going to do now is do a little computation here where I search for all Category 3 and higher hurricanes that have existed in August, September and October within 200 miles of Irma's current location. Craig, what's its position right now? I don't have the data.
As of the NHC's latest update, its position right now is 16.8 degrees north, 52.6 degrees west. That's as of
15.8 or 16.8? 15?
16.8.
16.8
16.
and 52.6.
Yeah.
So, putting that into this app here, we find out how many analogs we could have and see what it comes up with, just to have a little bit of climatological perspective.
Looking at the last few frames of IR on Irma, the convection, the little area of convection that was in the eye, looks to be just near enough about gone. The southern eye wall is blowing up, literally right at the eye, right on the very edge of the eye wall is blowing up, and the high minus 70s are trying to wrap around the entire eye wall.
Wow.
So this thing could now be getting even stronger, and this thing, so much for an eye wall replacement. But of course, I'm not ruling out an eye wall replacement, because it could still yet happen. But
You know
maybe
something,
later on.
Craig? With what the models are saying now, the best analog. Any idea?
I've probably got one, but I'm not going to say it. And
The best analog right now is probably, in fact it is, it's Hurricane Donna of 1960 is the best analog for this storm right now. If anyone remembers Donna, it reached category 4 on 2 different occasions. Yep, category 4 on 2 different occasions, the second of which was when it moved into the Florida Keys. It made landfall near Marathon, if I'm not mistaken, as a category 4. I did a short documentary there 3 years ago, and then moved into the western coast of Florida as a category 3 or 4. Moved pretty much over Orlando as a category 1, and then out into the Atlantic, affected the Outer Banks as a category 2, then went to the northeast. Remains to be seen whether the last part of that will verify, but that is at the moment the best analog. Another decent analog for more modern people, maybe, if it goes a bit north of the forecast, it could do a Francis, another retired storm, and if it goes south of projection, it could do a Georges of 1998. That is still on the table as well. And those are pretty much the best analogs, and one other as well, just for the Leeward Islands, Luis of 1995 is the best analog for the next 2 days until landfall, but then it recurves, and that's not what we're expecting from Irma. Hugo of 89 as well, of course. You could say the same thing for the first 2 days, but not beyond. So those are pretty much the best analogs we have, and none of them are good storms, Craig. All of them were retired.
Yes, unless we're all going to go for this one being retired, which there is the possibility that it might, depending on its landing pact.
Yeah, can't speculate yet.
Yes, but that in itself is too early to tell. But we'll probably come to that conclusion when it's making landfall or going up to it, whether it might be retired or not. But Irma, regardless of it, when it makes landfall, or does make landfall on the Lesser Antilles, it's still a major hurricane. It doesn't matter what strength it is.
Oh yeah.
Cat 3, 4, or 5. To be honest, nobody really cares what strength it is. It's a major hurricane. It's a massive danger to life. Not saying that the Cat 1 and Category 2 hurricane isn't, but they still are. All hurricanes are dangerous. Even tropical storms and depressions are dangerous. But please pay close attention to what the National Hurricane Center is saying, because they provide the information that helps protect people from or gives information to protect themselves, or give them information what to do during a hurricane or before a hurricane strikes. So, just to reiterate, please listen to what the NHC does say. They have giving out watches. They're going to probably soon put out warnings, I'd imagine, for the lesser Antilles, maybe even tropical storm watches. It might be included as well for some of the islands as well. But I can't stress it enough. Please listen to the National Hurricane Center and what they say.
And we are expecting more from them in about an hour. I expect, and I'd be surprised if they don't, upgrade the hurricane watches to warnings, and they may issue some extended watches as well for maybe the Virgin Islands at the next update. It wouldn't surprise me if not. They might not issue the hurricane warnings, but they ought to, in my opinion.
Yeah, it might be. I think it would be better off if they, if they did put that up. But it's up to them and how they see it. It's not up to us and how we see it. And we can't really go and tell the National Hurricane Center do this, that, and the next thing. To be honest, but it's up to the NC.
Well, we could advise. We could advise on the air right now if you like.
But
I advise hurricane warnings, but that they stay within their protocol, and I'm not sure if it's within 36 hours yet.
And just looking at the latest IR imagery of Irma, there is now -70, high -70 cloud top starting to show on the furthest southern eye wall, but what looks to be some cloud warming on the southern eye wall. Is that the infamous second eye wall starting to show? I wonder.
Not this again.
I honestly do wonder, because we never know, but I could be wrong. I'm hoping I'm not wrong, because to be honest, it gives people more of a chance to get prepared and depend on that. Does actually hamper the storm in terms of strengthening, because the storm will stop strengthening for a time. It will either weaken or maintain intensity. It might maintain major hurricane strength, might hold 120 miles an hour until the eye wall replacement is done, just in case if it does decide to do one, if it does. Because it will end up doing the one at some point, you'd imagine. So regardless of it, it is still a major hurricane, so don't take my word for it and just saying that an eye wall replacement is going to happen, because it might not. But obviously we'll keep an eye on it, obviously, as we've got to see if an eye wall replacement does occur or not. I'll be waiting to see what the next microwave imagery update is, and the ADT has updated to the eye being plus 2.8 degrees.
Yeah, indeed. Just to remind people, we're not staying too long. We're going to be here for another hour after this before we part ways. We will be running 24-hour coverage on Irma when the threat gets a little bit nearer. It will probably begin tomorrow. We'll have more updates throughout the rest of today and this evening. But in the meantime, we need to prepare for what's to come. And we will stay until the National Hurricane Center updates in about an hour. But in the meantime, there's not too much to say. But if you've got questions for us, that can often keep us going very much considerably. I mean, I value the viewers, certainly, because they often think of things that we don't have time to think of. So, I mean, people want to know about what's behind Irma right now, Craig, and we picked up on that earlier on.
Yeah.
Invest 94L, which was designated about an hour ago, and that has a 70% chance of forming. The models in general are predicting a weak system out of it, but it could also affect the Lesser Antilles, Leeward Islands, in about 5 days.
Yeah, there is that chance and possibility that it could do.
Do you have any imagery of it right now?
None of what I've got, but that shows you how focused we are on.
Let's see if I can get some imagery.
Yes, I'd imagine it doesn't look like much just now, because RAM hasn't got it up yet. I imagine it's not anyway. I'll do an update on it anyway. But
in the meantime, you're looking. at the latest National Hurricane Center advisory and percentage chance of tropical storm force winds, and I always find that they're a little bit conservative on those percentage chances personally.
Yeah. To be honest, they can be on and off, but in terms of being conservative, but most of the time there's a good deal of conservative,
Right.
going into some forecasts and probabilities such as that. But you can sort of understand why that's the case, but then you think they should sort of up the ante on it, but it's up to them and how they see it in my mind. But I'm just trying to look at Recon Radar.
I think this is a picture of 94L, an animation. I think that's 94L, the one that's just formed in the Atlantic behind Irma. And very disorganized at the moment, and the cloud tops
very
aren't.
broad circulation.
The cloud tops are quite low as well, so not too much convection going on in that whole thing.
Yeah, you can see a very, very broad, very, very weak circulation in what is supposed to be 94L. It doesn't look like much just now, but it could become today, or in the next couple of few days or so. But it might not. It might just fizzle out. But it might not be the case. But we'll keep an eye on that, along with major hurricane Irma, all of which being our main focus right now. But I'm trying to find the actual recon.
Yeah, as for 94L, just to say, it
Yeah.
might affect the Leeward Islands. Apart from that, no other areas are expected to be affected because Irma will be there, so it can't go west because Irma's there.
Yes, it can't. So that's probably going to be another mess once Irma is out the way, or once Irma's really starting to get pretty darn cagey. But at this point, but looking at some of the Recon Radar, there is that what looks to be the half of a brand new eye wall, but then the other half of it's remaining rather weak, and it's as if Irma does not want to try and do an eye wall replacement. So we'll keep an eye on it, whether it does or not. We'd imagine it will end up doing one eventually. I'm trying to find the best image that I can screen share of it, but here's an earlier image, if I can bring it up anyway. That's if I can. So here's some of the Recon radar that was recorded inside of Irma. So here you can see clearly what looks to be the brand new eye wall forming around the old eye, but this is an older image. This isn't what's come out of Recon, but this is one of the images. But what looks to be the eye wall was near enough complete and ready to kill the older one.
I can see what you mean there.
Yeah, but what happened was this is the other image of what Recon got. That's not the other one I wanted. Nope, that's not it. This is the other one. So here you can see how the eye wall replacement is supposedly tried to go. So this is one of the other images. You can see how there what looks to be the beginning of it, but it might not be. But you can see how what looks to be the Irma has tried and attempted to try and do a eye wall replacement. So it's going to be touch and go whether she does do it, but she might eventually. So
I just want to show a wide shot infrared image now, which is what I was trying to get before, just to give you some context of where Irma is right now in relation to the islands. There it is. You can see it's been progressing pretty much ever so slightly south of west in the latest frames. And I do wonder, Craig, whether it's actually going north of forecast. I think we can get... There's the tropical storm points up on the image as well. It's hard to tell at that low resolution. But as you can see,
Well,
it's approaching the islands.
looking at the last few IR images of her, she looks to be trying to go northward, but it's well, it's hard to tell because it's it's that 1 minute imagery, and yeah, sure, it's great. It's good to look at, and sure, it's useful to use, but it might be doing that now. But Irma, I don't. She's one of them ones that's confusing to watch. But looking at the last few frames, the convection inside the eye has come back, and I don't. But this warm area has been persisting, so this might be it now, trying to kick into effect.
Well, it looks personally that it is moving a bit to the north of the forecast points at the moment. By looking at our imagery that's available by NOAA, and I was looking at the floaters that I loaded up the forecast points, and it's just slightly north of the next forecast point, which is a bit interesting.
It's going to be hard to tell whether this warm area, see how the warm areas kicked out and started to persist on the southern eye wall of Irma. You can see how it's actually started to latch onto the eye now. You see how the last frame there, it's just latched onto the southern eye wall. This might be the brand new eye starting to try and show now, because obviously sometimes the imagery can be behind what Recon has. So, is it or is it not? It remains
Not by much, though.
No, not by much. It's only just started to show through because it's only just started to persist. But it is now starting to persist, so this might be it. But cloud tops are starting blowing up, so that remains to be seen. Is it or is it not? Because
Indeed.
you see there on the northern eye wall, the cloud tops are continuing to blow up. So
Orlando, earlier we were talking to you, and I think you broke up when we were talking about how you have family in other parts of the Caribbean. And I don't know whether you have any thoughts on chances of impacts in those areas, and whether you've heard from them and what they're doing.
Well, yesterday my father and my grandmother were calling me from southern Florida, and they're wondering if the storm was going to head for them, and I said that it's not for certain, or it's not like sure or certain it's going to hit, but for them to just watch out and be careful and prepare for the worst. But and I have also family in Puerto Rico that I haven't heard from yet. My cousin just left from there and is heading to New Jersey. And over there, it's basically, like, I doubt the damage to their homes are going to be big because of the fact that Irma might just go a bit to the north and they might not get the whole core. And for the most part, most of them are inland, although some are, although some live in San Juan, which they should be careful with. But I think it's likely that Puerto Rico will face some sort of impacts from Irma, whether it be rough seas or gusty winds and heavy rain. But other than that, we just have to wait and see. Unfortunately, we can't basically know if it's going to be big or not.
I would suggest that, as I say, with Puerto Rico, chances of hurricane conditions are probably around, well, north coast around half, south coast a bit less than half. Tropical storm force winds probably likely across the island. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with the fact that it might hurricane conditions would be on the northern side.
Of course.
The southern side is still questionable, but tropical storm conditions are without a doubt going to affect the island.
Yeah. And what do you think about these model runs that are saying that Irma's going to make landfall in Cuba and then recurve late, and end up on the western coast of Florida?
Well, either or, it's still going to be bad either way. If the storm is depends how far in it goes into Cuba and when it goes into Cuba, and even if it even goes into Cuba, because all of those options are still on the table as this is several days out. And like for example, right now, Irma currently has it could be just a um, like a small roll to the north and just basically rotate itself back into the track. Um, but right now it's moving a little bit to the north. So who knows how Arma's going to play out because as the cone shows by the NHC, the it's basically anywhere from north of Jamaica all the way up to the Bahamas.
Let's get some quick fire questions. Will it directly hit Puerto Rico? I don't know whether that means a landfall. I'd say a landfall is unlikely, but especially since it seems to be a little bit north of the forecast right now, chances are decreasing for a direct landfall, but still what we said before we maintain. What do we think about the intensity forecast for the GFS and the Euro model, who are normally a bit conservative about intensity? Well, I don't know if you've been watching the GFS recently, but in the last around 12 months, GFS has been completely ludicrously nuts over absolutely everything that forms.
Whoever did that.
Sorry? Oh, we've lost him. But the GFS has been nuts. But some people in our team defend the GFS in that the track forecasts that they put out are usually correct, but the intensity has been off the boil recently. But I don't know how you can say that with Irma, because GFS yesterday said that it would make landfall as a Category 5 in North Carolina with a pressure of 880 something, and today it says Florida with a pressure of 895. It's white noise at the moment, and whilst either of those scenarios could happen, that it's not backed by any other model, it's not backed by consistency throughout several successive runs of the same model. It can't be trusted at this moment in time, and I don't think many of the models can. The safest thing to do right now is to look at the National Hurricane Centre's prognosis based on their interpretation and sufficient weight on, weight off of the various models. But you know, the best analog right now, as I said earlier, is Hurricane Donna of 1960. That's the best analog. Not to say it's a perfect analog, but Donna swept through the Keys, through the Central Keys as a Category 4, and then went and hit Western Florida near the same intensity, then moved out as a Category 2 over the Outer Banks and then towards New England. So that could still happen as well. We really don't know at this point. But if it stays west of Florida and hits the Panhandle region, something like a Dennis or not an Ivan, but something that hits over there, it won't survive. But it will move inland and be very wet, certainly. But
yes,
I'm not sure it will do that.
Just looking at the last few images of IR on Irma, the eye looks to be shrinking, so the eye wall replacement might actually start.
Really? Could you show us?
I sure can. I'm just updating the imagery right now so I can get the latest one. Just to reiterate that this is GO 16, so their tropical air zones do update every 1 minute. So yeah, that looks to be that the eye is getting smaller, so this might be a very strange styled EWRC that where the eye shrinks, disappears, and then a brand new one starts to develop around it. It might be one of them weird ones. But regardless of it, it does look like the EWRC could be about to start with the eye wall shrinking on.
Could you play the animation?
suppose. There we go. So you can see how the, how the eye. You can see there the eye wall is starting to shrink, and you see how warm it's. So she is thinking about the eye wall
The cloud
replacement.
tops.
She probably is.
The cloud tops in what appear to be all directions are increasing in those latest frames,
Yeah.
certainly in the north and east. As for the
Yeah,
eye,
interesting.
it's still a little bit messy and untidy, but still not obvious that an eye wall replacement cycle might be occurring yet.
No.
Yeah.
But it is hinting at it that this could be the start of it. I'm not saying that it is it, but it might be the startings of one right now. But normally, well, as you would normally see with storms that do eye wall replacements, they do tend to cloud tops before the second eye wall then starts to show. The old one starts to wither away and die. But looking at it in the last frame, I don't know whether you've seen that. See how the central area of the storm is actually starting to push out in the last few images. You see how obviously it's frozen, so that's not great at all. Freezes mid loop, and then you can see in the last frame as it turned, you can see how it just expands. So there is obviously some hints of an eye wall replacement somewhere in there, if the storm has been continuously expanding. So she's obviously, Irma is up to something, but what, we just don't know. But it might be the eye wall replacement, as I've said, starting to try and take an effect.
Well, I'm not convinced yet, personally. Switching back to the visible, there it is. Still looks very good on visible. The looks can always be misleading.
Yes, that's visible does tend to make a major hurricane. It could be on visibles. A major hurricane could be looking fantastic on visible, but doesn't look too great on IR. So
Well, it doesn't look too, it looks like a category 4, gee.
yeah, obviously. But you get them major hurricanes that do that. They look great on visible, but not too great on IR. But Irma is certainly looking good on IR and visible. So
Yeah. Well, that's the thoughts of Craig there. I'm Nathan Foy, by the way, hosting the live stream. Not at my best, as you can hear. My voice is as bad as Irma's eye wall replacement history. But we're dealing with it, and obviously we will keep you updated on the storm. But there's not too much to say about it at this moment in time, because we're using our own interpretations from the satellite imagery and waiting for the National Hurricane Center's update. But now we're joined by Isaac. We were joined by Isaac briefly. As soon as I say it, he leaves us.
Oh dear.
But we are expecting to be joined by Isaac, who is in Corpus Christi, obviously very close to where Harvey hit last week. And we'll get some more insight from him shortly. So, Craig, questions. Can you explain what makes it look so good?
Well, low wind shear and high SSTs. That's pretty much, and
I think
that's pretty much all there is. Yeah.
I think they were more asking
and
about.
Obviously, those are the main ones.
I think they were more asking about its appearance.
Right.
What is it about Irma that looks good? And I guess people will want to know what is the difference between this right now and what a Category 5 would look like.
Well, a Category 4 is normally the eye. If it's mid-range, the eye is normally better defined. So if you're on about Atlantic, it can be somewhat perfectly circular. So it's a beautiful-looking symmetric eye. But if you're looking, say, elsewhere, you're looking for Category 5. If it's, say, Pacific-wise, you're probably looking for -80, wrapping around the storm's eye wall and sustaining. But the Atlantic, the Category 5 may be a bit different, but I know the eye needs to be pretty well defined for it to be designated as one. And also, if Recon finds it, does fly in, finds it, then obviously it is one. But like right now, this is probably what you're looking at as a Category 4 hurricane, low end Cat 4.
Yeah.
Category 3.
Well, I mean that's still just to mention that's still not official. It is, according to the National Hurricane Center, 120 miles an hour, but myself and Craig believe from the satellite imagery that it's up to Category 4 status, and we do expect to see the National Hurricane Center use that number, 130 miles an hour, Category 4, at the next update. We'll wait and see whether that happens. We're expecting the update somewhere in the next 30 to 45 minutes, and we'll bring that to you. But we will be going off air at the end of this hour because we're still at a very early stage in Irma's life, and although we have demand for the coverage, we are just saving it a little bit longer before we do continuous coverage, which will probably begin on Tuesday morning. We'll have many more updates throughout the rest of Monday for interests in the Leeward Islands, and then obviously we'll probably be staying with you for the rest of the week as the storm moves through. It's like Matthew all over again, isn't it? We were here for five days non-stop during Hurricane Matthew. That certainly took a toll on not only us but everyone who was in its path. But you know, we're doing what we feel we should be doing to aid everyone who's watching, to deliver the best information possible, and take your questions whilst we're at it. And you can send in your questions by starting your message with Force 13, all in text. I believe we're joined by Isaac again. Are you there?
Yeah. I just woke up and I had to get everything sorted.
It is early over there.
But I see. Yeah.
You're joining.
I see Irma is.
You're joining us from Corpus Christi, Texas. Before we go on to Irma, just I don't think you've told people publicly on Force 13 yet what the result of Harvey was for you.
Well, even when I evacuated, I evacuated and I went into the northwestern eye wall of the thing, and I was weakening into a Cat 1 and then down to finally to a tropical storm. I got into the northwestern eye wall and it was pretty scary. Every once in a while, it sounded like someone's trying to break the door open, and it couldn't even stand. Luckily, our power didn't go out. It went out once because of a tree limb that hit the lines over there, but that was when I was evacuating. Over in Corpus itself, the damage wise was fairly. It wasn't bad nor say, or wasn't good nor say. It was just in the middle. There was small to medium-sized trees on the ground.
And you were just
leaves.
You were just a couple dozen miles away, really, from the landfall zone, or the eye
pretty
wall.
much. I mean, we got. It still hasn't gone into my mind how lucky we are, and how if this thing didn't have that eye wall placement cycle, it didn't do a jog to the east, I'm pretty much nearly certain that I probably would have come back home to either no house or a destroyed house.
All right. Well, what do you think about Irma this morning?
Damage-wise, just to finish up, it was just a whole bunch of trees on the ground, roof tiles everywhere, just maybe strong tropical storm force damage to Category 1 force damage. But going back to Irma, I was looking at a recon and it seems to have tried going under rapid intensification phase, it seems.
It's done some amount of intensification. Not rapid, I wouldn't say, but it's intensified, and we think it's going to be Category 4 at the next advisory. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, I haven't looked at satellite just yet, so I can't, But I've seen the black and white IR though, and it looks pretty decent. So it definitely could get up there today.
Yeah, I think we all could agree on that.
and
I mean,
more warnings will be issued soon, I expect, for the Leeward Islands. Isaac, what do you think about the track movement? Because last night the National Hurricane Center was undecided, and so were the models. The HMOM was a notable one that predicted recurvature. Now it's in line with HWRF and several other models that all say it's going to go into Cuba and then potentially onto Florida. What do you think?
well, that's really scary because I mean, I have friends over there, and they're probably gonna lose their mind if I were to tell them about that. And I mean, if that holds true, well then, this might be a bad storm. And we can't necessarily say how strong it'll be. If it does do that, it's too far out to say. But if it does do that, it's gonna be quite the storm.
But it is moving slightly north of forecast, and that could make a difference. We're just waiting around really for the next 20 to 40 minutes for the next National Hurricane Center advisory. Sometimes it comes out early as well, so we'll be looking out for that. Craig, have you been looking at any observations recently of Irma? No recon, but apparently one or two people talking about the buoy readings.
Yeah, I know there's been buoy readings, but they normally show up on the recon, but there's been none shown, and it is confirmed that the NOAA 2 mission is now finished.
Oh.
And
Okay.
the related drop zone that they did find, there was an update from them that it found a 946.
Yeah,
So-
we think the pressure's in the 940s, and that it's a pretty low latitude for that. I mean, gee, Matthew wasn't much further south and was a Category 5 after all.
True.
But pressure doesn't tell the whole tale about a storm. This storm's probably... You think it's bigger than Matthew when it peaked?
Ooh,
Possibly.
possibly bigger, yeah.
But it intensified rapidly as well, which is why it had such a high pressure for a Category 5. This is probably minimal Category 4 based on that pressure and its satellite appearance. And we'd be surprised if they don't go with 130 miles an hour. They must have a good reason for it if they don't.
Mm. But just looking at the last few images of the IR is not looking as good as it was.
Really?
Yeah, it's gotten.
Could
It's
you
actually
show
gotten
us?
smaller. The eye wall looks to have gotten smaller, and the eye looks to have gotten that less bit defined. I'll try and play the animation. It would be very helpful. So here you can see how the eye. Well, the last image says it all. As you can see how the eye shrunk, and now the last image shows that the eye looks to be not as big as it was.
It's still hard to
in the
tell.
last few images. So.
I don't think it's an eye wall replacement cycle, Craig. I just think it's a somewhat ragged eye that's struggling to get its clarity together. But sooner or later it will be an eye wall replacement cycle. I just don't think it's going to happen just yet. Maybe later this afternoon, this evening.
This is probably it starting right now. So as we speak, it's probably already thinking about it. So it's all probably starting as we speak.
You really think so?
But yes.
I don't. Well, we'll see.
Well, the storm's been expanding all pretty much all afternoon. So
I mean, you look at that whole red zone there. I mean, that's obviously some inclement weather in there, and that area is expanding.
yeah,
Could you zoom back out again and show us some context with the islands, maybe?
it sadly doesn't show.
Yeah.
There's one of the islands. It's starting to show it. One of the islands is in view.
Oh, it's at an angle, isn't it? That's Barbados.
Yes, because it's basically put into certain mesoscales, as you can see on the sectors it's put into mesoscale 1 for today. So you can see one of the islands is in view of GO16.
Barbados.
So
there
here's
on
its
the bottom left.
correlation. So here's one of the outer outflowing bands
Very
from
peripheral band.
From Irma. So this is probably going to deliver some very inclement weather. So thunderstorms, heavy rains, and all that from it. So pretty much what you would expect from the outer band of a hurricane, especially at this strength, sending it out that far. But that's impressive in how far it got. And it's somewhat holding intensity, but it looks to be on the last few frames on that one's fading away. But don't take your eye off it because it can still dump a lot of rain on land. But Irma's she's up to something.
Up to no good.
Just to reiterate right now, from the National Hurricane Center Advisory, a hurricane watch is in effect for Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius and St. Martin. The whole island of St. Martin, both jurisdictions, some of it is French, some of it is Dutch, and St. Barthélemy as well. No other warnings in effect right now. The Virgin Islands are likely to be in the watch zone very soon, and the watches that already exist could be upgraded to warnings soon. Tropical storm watches and warnings could also be issued further south on those islands as well. And then you've got Puerto Rico, which will probably be under a hurricane watch later today. Just about I was wondering about rainfall actually, but the National Hurricane Center haven't specified any rainfall expectations from this.
Well, I guess they don't expect it to be the main threat then.
Well, I guess not. But it's always something to consider. At the moment they're only talking about the winds and the surf, and obviously those are two higher priority issues.
Yeah, a lot of those islands are like basically mainly like tourist islands, like places you'll go for vacation for, so it's easily for someone to be just ignorant enough to not heed the warnings and just do whatever they want. So
Oh yeah, there's.
And let's not forget, I just want to say this, it's been a long time since, if this verifies and a major hurricane hits the Leeward Islands, it's a long time since the last one. You can't really count Earl, to be honest.
well, I don't know how long exactly then. How about Hugo?
Oh, more recent than that, Luis was more recent. And Luis is one of our analogues, 1995. And that is one of the best analogues for the Leeward Islands right now. So if anyone over there remembers Luis, this one could well be similar.
Yeah, I just hope people just take like their precautions and like stay safe. You can go, Isaac.
Well, yeah, because pretty much when Harvey came along, pretty much half of the people over here evacuated and half of them didn't. And I'm pretty certain if they didn't evacuate and Harvey, if we got slammed by Harvey head on, I'm pretty certain they would have changed their mind up if that happened. Because I mean, I don't think anybody wants to be in at least a category 2 or 3 hurricane. I mean, you'd have to be pretty, foolish.
Well, the worst part about this situation is these islands aren't near the mainland. There is no bridge that they could just take and go shelter. So basically, they're stuck there and can't do much of anything.
All they could do is really board up the windows and then just shelter, really.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope that their buildings are at least built up to code.
Could you imagine what it would have been like before satellites, when people didn't know when the next storm was coming? At least now we do, and we have very good lead time for these islands, which would have been woefully unprotected in days of old. There's my phone again. Popular today, it seems.
Of all times.
Well, on the bright side of the situation is that, at least for the most part, like American-owned islands like Puerto Rico, for example, I'm not too concerned when it comes to infrastructure there. but more so, I'm more concerned about coastal floodings and things like that, and wind damage along the coast. If you're inland, everything should be all right, but expect tropical storm force winds if you are one of those people that are in Puerto Rico at the moment.
Yeah.
You've got to keep an eye on Irma, regardless if you are far inland and you don't really expect hurricane force winds. Please do expect you could get strong weak tropical storm to at least strong tropical storm force winds if you aren't expected to get hurricane force winds. You may see hurricane force gusts, but do keep an eye on it because tropical storm you could see some wind damage to property.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's around what I got with Harvey. So, and not to go back on Harvey, but yeah, I kind of received. I did an analysis, my own analysis on the damage, and I got high end tropical storm force damage to low end Cat 1, and it was pretty bad.
Yes, and pretty soon Force 13 will be releasing its report on Harvey as well, which will go online and on a video if anyone's interested about that. But in the meantime, we're looking at Irma and waiting for the National Hurricane Center's next update, which is due at some point in the next half hour. We think that it's a Category 4. Craig, looking at the latest, the eye might be waning. You think they might go with 125 instead, Category 3?
It might, if anything, it probably has gone up to Category 4, but you never know. It might go up to 125, or it could sustain. It's going to be hard to tell, but I'm willing to see what the NEC say.
Yeah.
That's coming up soon. As soon as it comes out, we'll let you know what they say and whether any of the warnings have extended. But if you have any questions for us in the meantime, do start your message with Force 13. And there's one that just came in. Could Irma hit Jamaica? Any thoughts on that? Well, it's out of the cone at this time. I would say the chances are exceedingly unlikely.
Yeah, it isn't seeming a very high chance, but there is a small likelihood that it might. But to be honest, I'm gonna sit and agree with what the NEC is saying for now, until obviously Irma does something different that says otherwise. So for now, I would agree with what the NEC is saying right now.
And will there be another hurricane after this? Well, it's a very vague question. We will at some point in the near future, but whether it is the system behind Irma 94L, I would say it's on the low side chances. I think it's a fair chance, a decent chance we'll see another hurricane in the Atlantic this year. Because there's still a lot of it to go.
Yes, there is.
Just a reminder for everyone, we're still not at the peak of Atlantic hurricane season yet climatologically. It's historically always been September 10th that is usually the peak day, the moment that the season peaks on average. It's not like that every year, of course, but we could have more activity down the line, and after what we've already had this year, I certainly wouldn't be surprised. But here's Irma, and we're still waiting for more information.
Because the update should be due out very, very soon, in fact.
Well, quite often the National Hurricane Centre do their update ridiculously early. Sometimes it can be half an hour early, so we're always spying on them from around this point on, because it's around 25 minutes before their scheduled update.
Because they do love to try and sneak out an update just when nobody's watching.
Yeah.
NEC seems to be good at doing that.
Orlando?
I said, but we're watching you.
Yeah, we certainly are.
We're being watched.
And God forbid if they're watching us. But there we
Oh,
go.
God.
Oh,
Um, But there we are. And the storm's still moving. You think it's still moving a little bit north of forecast, so the forecast cone will be changing as well.
Oh.
And
Just to let you know, Nathan, another recon is going in. An air reserve reconnaissance aircraft is going in. An AF-309 mission is going into Irma.
Where are they taking off from?
What looks to be Puerto Rico or St. Lucia.
Most likely St. Lucia.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll find out what they say when they get to Irma.
Shouldn't take them long to get there then.
Hopefully not. But in the meantime, we will see what they find.
Someone shouts at me in caps lock, are the models tweaked based on errors found from the prior prediction? I'm not actually sure if they factor in previous errors, but they're always changing. I don't think they do, because one occasion you can have a model saying one thing and then something absolutely completely different, and just doesn't make sense sometimes. Models adjust as always we say, they're there as guidance. They're not, they're computers. They're, to a degree, they're random, and whether they're correct or not is, I wouldn't say coincidental, but is somewhat, you know. Whereas national, you can't just take one model when you're looking at model runs. You've got to look at all of them and what the consensus is, if there is one, and if there isn't, you do what the National Hurricane Center does and go for some sort of a divide in between and put weight on some models and leave weight off others, depending on what the climatological conditions suggest, depending on what is ahead of the storm in terms of wind shear and sea surface temperatures. Because if you have a model saying that Irma's going to become a Category 5 and there's high wind shear ahead of it, it doesn't look like that would happen. Not to say that's the current situation, but just as an example. But we've not actually looked at wind shear, Craig. Could you tell us what sort of wind shear environment Irma's in?
Oh, she's in a very, very favourable environment. There is high shear ahead of her, but she'd been having high shear ahead of her for the whole of her life, but she'd been literally pushing it away from her. So theoretically, she isn't in any shear whatsoever at all. It's as if she's trying to create her own climate, or her own conditions and what she needs, which is a little bit worrying, because, you know, hurricanes that have done that don't tend to be very pretty ones. But looking at it right now, wind shear is increasing in front of a hurricane, but she is pushing it because it's moving further and further west every update. So let's see. Yes, it is decreasing, but over the storm right now, it's pretty much non-existent over the storm's core and over the storm just in general. But around the storm it is increasing, but it's as if she's formed her own little bubble to stay out of wind shear.
The stronger storms can do that.
Yes, and that's exactly what looks like what she's done. I'll try and bring a screen share up so I show everyone what I'm actually gibbering on about. Rather than gibbering on like a blithering idiot and not showing anybody. So here's what I've been blithering on about.
Right.
See higher wind shear, but you can see how the wind shear has actually been pushed. Because the last few updates, I'll also go back 3 hours and compare. So here's the wind shear now. You can see it was closer to Irma and decreasing, but now it's moving further away. In fact, it's looking like it's actually going to warp around Irma.
Oh my.
So it's going to be hard to tell what she's trying to do, but it looks like
it's interesting though. It is a significant amount of wind shear there. I think that's why the NHC aren't saying it's going to become a stronger system, and maybe the model's going to be wrong in predicting such rapid intensification in the first few days when it passes through the islands, but look beyond there. When it gets past Puerto Rico, wind shear is near nil all the way up to sort of halfway up Cuba and towards Andros Island of the Bahamas.
I wonder. I wonder what wind shear effect would be if Irma were to encounter it. It would be, well, the wind shear right now over Cuba is obviously nil, but towards it, it is easterly wind shear. Well, westerly, coming in from the west and moving to the east. So if Irma were to hit that, she would be literally slaughtered, which would be nice. Because we don't want a hurricane. Nobody wants a hurricane at all. But seeing it, it's as if she's morphing a little shear bubble around her just to try and create her own environment into what she needs.
Here's a question. I live in Tampa, Florida. Should I leave? Please let me know.
Oh, right now it's too early to say if you should do anything. Yeah. But in the next 48 hours, we should get a better view of what could it be the most likely track of Irma, as it's still uncertain at the moment, and the NHC doesn't even have it on its forecast cone for Florida yet.
Yeah, never too early to prepare. Make the preparations if you're concerned. If it enters the 5-day cone, make preparations regardless. And if it enters the 3-day cone, the warnings won't be too far away, and you should be completing your preparations ideally.
Regardless, it's always best to have hurricane preparations even before the hurricane season begins, so you can be ready for afterwards.
Well, they do. They do all sorts of education and outreach for that whole thing, don't they?
Yeah. So it's just stay on the ready. Just be careful about the system.
Here's an easy question. When was the last time we had 2 back-to-back Category 4 hurricanes in the Atlantic? Last year. Matthew and Nicole. It's not been a long time since the last time we had 2 Category 4s.
And that was the first time. When was before Matthew and Nicole, when was the last time we actually had 2 majors active at the same time before that happened?
Well, now you're testing me, Greg. I have no idea. The National Hurricane Centre aren't up with the advisory yet, but as soon as that happens, we'll let you know. It's due at any time. But there we go. And they'll update the graphics on this image as well, so when they update the graphics, we'll show you the new a question: why is the CLP5 model so crappy? That's a funny question. It probably always has, to be honest. That model has been going for decades.
Good Lord.
Pretty sure that model was one of the model that was going in the 80s or something, and it was always wrong back then as well. I think it's a statistical model, which will probably tell you.
That one is.
Will tell you why it's so poor.
Terrible.
More questions. Is it possible for the storm to make a right up through the west coast of Florida, or are we certain it will make a right up the east coast and the other Carolinas? Well, neither of those are certain. One of those will probably happen. At the moment, it's trending towards west coast Florida, and then east coast United States maybe. At the moment, it's looking less and less likely that the storm will do a Matthew, so to speak. It looks like it's going to come in from the west and just about enter the Gulf of Mexico and then move into Florida.
Just looking at...
But that's next week. That's not even going to be this week.
Yeah. I think anything going to Florida so far is a bit too far-fetched. But it's always worth having a little look. to see whether it might have whether it might actually start to affect Florida or not. So it's always worth having a check. But so far, it's a little bit too early to tell. But in the next update, it might start to become a little bit more clear. It might, but also there's a good chance it might not.
Well, here's a very interesting question. How dangerous is this storm against Harvey? Difficult to compare those. Harvey intensified very quickly. Harvey caused the hugest flooding problem probably in the history of Texas recently, at least. Harvey, massive storm.
Also slowed down.
Irma is going to be a bigger wind threat than Harvey for a wider area. For rainfall, I would suggest that pretty much everywhere it will be less of a threat, though Florida might have some issues maybe. But this is for the wind threat predominantly, more than pretty much anything else. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to compare this storm to Harvey.
Yeah, because Harvey, obviously, you've got to take into account it rapidly intensified, and then it slowed down drastically, and pretty much stalled.
But
so
if you missed us talking about the analogues earlier on, the best analogues for this storm right now are Hurricane Donna of 1960, if anyone remembers that. Hit Marathon as a Category 4 and moved into the western coast of Florida. Hurricane Francis might well be an analogue of 2004. Hurricane Luis, at least initially, is a good analogue, but not beyond the 2-day period. Which other one did I mention? If it goes further south than forecast, it could still do a Georges of 1998 as well. And that storm pretty much hit everywhere in the Caribbean. And then also hit the Gulf Coast.
Just looking at the last few frames of Irma, and it's looking more and more interesting what she's up to. We're going to see if there's a new update, and obviously, but I'll be keeping an eye on the recon that's supposedly to be to her once it loads. Until obviously the new recon says otherwise. But looking at the recent frames of Irma, you can see how this warm area to the south and how the cloud tops around the eye have now warmed and look like they've expanded outwards. So, Nathan, this might be it now. This now friendly might be it. Yes, because looking at that now, that this is now what could be the brand new eye wall starting to affect the storm. Because if you'll see how I'll play the animation just to give everybody a general idea. So here you can see how the eye wall and how the cloud tops here, look how spaced out they end up getting in the last frame. I wish it wouldn't freeze halfway through the bleeding. Look, god damn it!
Just to reiterate, I don't know if I was on air or not when I revealed the breaking news. The hurricane warnings have been issued. Breaking news: hurricane warning for Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius and St. Martin and St. Barthélemy. A hurricane watch has been issued for Guadeloupe, British Virgin Islands, US Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico and its islands of Vieques and Culebra. A tropical storm watch has been issued for Dominica. That's the latest right now, still 120 miles per hour at the update. That is just in. Once the National Hurricane Center updates their forecast cone, which they will shortly, we will In fact, I think they all... no, they haven't yet. Once they issue the new forecast cone, we will bring it to you. In the meantime, we're with the imagery of the storm.
Yes.
And the eye
so
looks very
obviously,
good there, but it is shrinking.
yes, this could be now. Well, as I've said, as I've lost count many times, I've said it, that this now looks to be the start of the eye wall replacement, as this warm area has now emerged and looks to be going with the circulation of the eye now. This, as you can see, how the storm's cloud tops, you can see how they've warmed around the eye and how they've also expanded outwards, how they've now been spaced out further away from the eye. So this is the brand new eye starting to show itself for about probably the 1 billionth time. But regardless of that, it's still a major hurricane. The NHC's probably picked up on this. They probably picked up on that Irma is going to try and attempt an eye wall replacement at some point today, and it's already doing it right now. Which, well, now that's exactly what I feared. Now that it's doing the eye wall replacement and it's still got time, it can quickly finish doing the eye wall replacement and then recover, because it's got plenty of time to do so. So but at the minute she is doing an eye wall replacement. Doesn't mean that she's going to die after this. She might, obviously, she won't. She'll weaken maybe, but not by much. She'll either maintain intensity, which the NC might have been picking up on, that she might not have got any stronger. But looking at it right now, she looks to be holding 120 miles an hour until this eye wall replacement is over and done with. But until then, you might see more intensification afterwards, after the eye wall replacement is done, which I hope isn't the case, but knowing the storm that's got this much time, it might be the case that it could just re-intensify. And why has the loop just died?
No idea.
The loop has literally just died. McAfee, why are you coming up now? Everything's just breaking.
Craig's technical issues over there, wonderful. Craig dealing with his computer. Well, let's go back to...
Oh, the joys.
Yes. The only problem is, Craig, you're live. Let's go back to more imagery of... visible imagery of Irma right now.
Live blooper, everyone.
Indeed. There's the latest imagery, and you can certainly see that the eye is getting smaller. Craig's back with his stuff.
Yes, it's now started working again. Oh my god. It's not the first time I've had technical issues. I've had HP management or something pop up during the stream. Let's not go there. But looking at the recent imagery now, it does look like this is the start of the eye wall replacement, because looking at the structure, it has expanded and it's still expanding. So it looks like the eye's going to look like it's going to be bigger than what it originally is. So you're looking at a brand new eye coming out. The cloud tops are trying to cool, but they're expanding outwards as they're cooling. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when this new eye wall does emerge.
Yep, just to reiterate once more, hurricane warnings have been issued for all of those areas that were under hurricane watches just now. Hurricane watches have been included for the Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands and the US Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And those will be reflected, have already been reflected in our bottom bar there, and will be shown on the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone whenever it comes out, which shouldn't take too long.
We hope.
And then we will finish up here for the time being and return later this evening. We will run 24-hour coverage on Irma beginning on Tuesday if it stays strong. And obviously we will monitor the developments as they happen, of course, because it has the potential to be a very significant storm indeed. People asking about Miami and Tampa right now. Anywhere in Florida, it's too early to say. But that will probably be the biggest area of contention, which side of Florida it might strike. Some models say east, some say west. Either way, it's going to be Sunday at the earliest. It's still a long way out.
I'm looking at the latest IR imagery on the screen right now. The warm area has gotten warmer, so this looks to be the brand new eye starting to come in. So the eye wall replacement is now looking like it's going to be in effect as we speak. In fact, it is coming into effect as we speak. So we're going to see a new eye starting to emerge. So Irma is doing its 1 trillionth eye wall replacement.
About its 7th, maybe.
Yeah, I know I'm a bit exaggerating, because the 1 trillion eye wall replacements is impossible. But probably you're probably right with about maybe 7 eye wall replacements. But then again, it might just be structural changes. But from what I've seen on Microwave, it looked to be much structural changes. So she wasn't too happy with the way she was structured. But she still affected her eyes nonetheless. But this one is a genuine eye wall replacement. Hopefully, should come out before we finish it up. Hopefully, shows the new.
Yeah, we lost you briefly there. You might want to start again.
Yeah, as I said before, I'll reiterate. I'll repeat that. I hope that new microwave image comes out before we finish. I hope to show that what is going on, to help back up what Recon has seen on radar, to help show if there is a double eye wall. But it looks like on IR that there is a secondary eye wall and a new eye starting to come into play. But just to say that this does not mean that Irma is not going to re-intensify. This Irma could easily re-intensify afterwards. It's going to take a little while to recover, but it might do it quickly. But not saying it won't do it quickly, or not saying it is going to do it quickly either. It could do either of the two options. So I would keep everybody that is in the path of Irma right now. Please keep an eye on Irma, and also do preparations, and please listen to the NHC and what they're saying. Obviously, because seeing an eye wall replacement, don't immediately think that Irma is going to die, because obviously she isn't, because the conditions are still favorable around her. Because working out from the wind shear that's around her is actually her outflow. So that's her outflow that's causing the shear that's around her at the minute. So that's a pretty impressive outflow that she's got. So you can see this is one of the reasons why I don't want anyone, or nobody wants anyone to write any of the storm off completely just because it's doing an eye wall replacement. So this storm has a very, very high chance that it could re-intensify after the eye wall replacement, but then there's a good chance that it might not. But I'm leaning to the chance that it could re-intensify after.
Oh, certainly. I would certainly think so.
I don't know what the new image should show a better eye.
That's a warm eye, though.
It is a very warm eye. That's might be also hindering, showing the fact that, the storm is trying to, so being one of the weird ones, trying to intensify when it does the eye wall replacement, but let's not go there at all. But I'm willing to see what happens after, when the Recon flies in.
Do you think the National Hurricane Center were right to keep it at 120 miles per hour?
I think they were. Because eye wall replacements do normally tend to stop intensification phases for the time being.
And in their forecast, they actually now, for the first time, say that it's going to get to 145 miles per hour.
So they are expecting it to get stronger after its eye wall replacement. So I can understand where that comes from.
Yeah, in fact, that will be at its closest point to the hurricane warning area.
Ooh. That's not good. Not good at all.
Yeah.
But I can understand where the NHC have got that one from. I really can. I think everyone can, because obviously, how Iowa replacements work, there's been many storms that have benefited from Iowa replacements. Irma might be one of many, because you can get them storms that struggle to get their eye out initially, but then do an Iowa replacement and just benefit from it. So that's the thing that I'm a little bit nervous about, that Irma might be one of them storms that needs an Iowa replacement, does an Iowa replacement, and benefits from it drastically.
Yeah, indeed.
If
the conditions aren't there when the Iowa replacement cycle occurs, it just goes.
Yeah. But it appears in the conditions are there, so that's the bit I'm nervous about, that this thing could, I'm not saying that gradual intensification isn't one of the possibilities, but rapid intensification afterwards is still a possibility, because I'm certainly not ruling it out. I'm sure the NC isn't ruling that out. It is a possibility. So, as I said, this is one of the reasons why I'm nervous about it, because it could be one of them storms that it struggles to get its eye out first time. It gets it out
Craig,
final attempt, and then does an Iowa replacement.
We're just looking at the new cone from the National Hurricane Center. Not much change in direction, but you can see all of the watches and warnings that are now in effect. As you can see, the US and British Virgin Islands are under a hurricane watch, and Puerto Rico and Guadeloupe, and Dominica to the south there, a tropical storm watch. All the areas that were under hurricane watches before are now under hurricane warnings. That's Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius and St. Martin, and St. Barthélemy. At this point, we're pretty much finished here for now, because that's how long we're going to be running for. We've been here for 3 hours delivering the updates on Irma. There will be plenty more updates on the Force 13 channel throughout this evening, and we expect that we will run 24-hour coverage beginning tomorrow. But in the meantime, we have to gather ourselves for a while, and we'll be producing more updates in due course. So I'd like to thank Craig, Orlando and Isaac for being with me over the last 3 hours, in part or in full as the case may be. And from us, and from myself, Nathan Foy, here with a very poor voice, unfortunately, but I've been trying. That's all for now, and we'll have more on Irma as the time calls. You can of course follow Force 13 on its social mediums, Facebook and Twitter, search Force 13 all in text. You can add Fool13 on Skype, FOOL13, and add extension 9094 on Discord. We'll be back with more this evening, and I can tell you we'll be doing regular streams tomorrow, Tuesday, as Irma nears the islands. For now, that's it, and we'll see you again soon.